sleepless nights, coffee houses, clubs, and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I'll see you in the morning light. Light on as I drive on, singing our song. Keep the light on as I drive on, singing our song. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I
All right, folks, welcome to Inside the Numbers with, What Are the Odds? With Barnes and Baris. I am one half of What Are the Odds? Rich Baris, the People's Pundit. I thought it was Inside the Numbers Day because I'm working on the poll, and I'm thinking numbers. Oh my God. As usual, Barnes will join us. And while we wait for him to join us, let's go over the thing we saw out of Justice Thomas today. It's a lot we're going to talk about. We're also going to glance at some of the early polling results. And before the show is going, I'm literally waiting as we're doing this. Really interesting stuff. Should I tell him?
I don't know.
This would have been totally done by now. There was a problem with the script and there's two ways to get certain demographics. You can ask people and take their word for it, or you can dedupe them against their entries in the voter files or in the consumer files. If you have that information, then you can then pass it through a URL. All right, a URL code, basically. And it will automatically pull that data in. So I know I'm talking to so-and-so. If it matches in their file in either the consumer or voter files, what do I want? What am I looking for? What am I talking about? Household income. Did they apply for a credit card? And they had to tell the credit card company what their income was, all right? Something like that, for instance. Or are they registered as a certain party voter in a state? Well, they may tell you I'm an independent, but they're a registered Democrat, or vice versa. They may tell you I'm a Democrat, but they're a registered independent. So we like to do that because people lie. A lot. And even in region, we may see that they're in the Northeast or something like that. But they'll say they're in the West. I mean, it happens. It's stupid, but it does happen. So we like to double check. And because we were doing it that way, it was completely on me. And we're going to have to eat it. It's that simple. But we gathered quite a bit, and it dawned on me that we didn't have the verifications until it was done.
Let me just put a disclaimer out there.
Oh.
This is the first time
It's ever happened.
Rich ever
You know
made
why?
this error.
You know why?
First time.
That specific day, I wanted
I was
to.
very sick.
Yeah, she was very sick. I had to deal with the kids. It's totally on me. I made a boo-boo. But I won't process data that I don't 100% stand behind. I won't forget about publishing it. I won't even process it. So I would rather take the hit to my pocket because you guys already funded
You
it.
did what you...
I'd rather say,
part.
my fault. Looks like I'm going to pay for this one. I would rather do that than push or publish data that I do not 100% stand behind. So we'd already had this out and pretty and clean, but I had to last minute go back and, gather quite a few. Quite a few. The good news is we have a lot of total responses because some I can. Some I can go back and say, all right, I know that person. I know this, not that I personally know. I'm saying we can identify who that is and that we can do it and we can draw that data in. So we'll have a ton. It's looking like right now we're sitting at about 2,200 that have been processed so far. So it's going to be a very large sample because that's we are not. I mean, I think we're there as far as responsive quotas being hit for each target group. But it's always good to have more. Bigger's better. Bigger is better. In polling, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They're lying. Bigger is better. I know. I'm half crude. I'm half a gentleman. That's who I am. All right. So,
That's why I love you.
in any event, yeah, a lot of that part though you don't. You hate me. Hate that part of me. All right. So, in any event, some really interesting stuff. We asked everything from HR1. The survey got huge, guys. The survey got huge. So some things maybe you would have hoped to see in there aren't in there. I mean, we got stuff about COVID vaccinations. We had even somebody wanted to know about extraterrestrial life, and I'm like, you know what?
Let's do
I
it.
want to know this because I have seen, Tucker will cover ATIP, the revelations about ATIP that came out. I know from other people, certain people that I know, that ATIP evolved into something else. So something like ATIP, which is actually supposedly branching out and looking into even more claims, is real and is underway, and they're briefing U.S. senators about it on Capitol Hill almost, not frequently, but multiple times enough to know now that even Senator Marco Rubio, for instance, is taking this very seriously. So what am I talking about? Advanced aerospace, aerial phenomena, or right, ATIP, whatever, phenomena, and basically they were investigating sightings by U.S. naval aviators, all right? And that's where some of that footage came from in 2017. And then by 2019, Rubio and company were getting briefings. So Rubio now is on the Intelligence Committee, and he is the man when it comes to that. So in any event, to make a very long story short, we asked a couple of questions. Do you believe that sightings, UFO sightings, which one more represents your view? That at least some are legitimate visitations from another world, from intelligent beings from another world, or that all sightings can be explained by human activity or natural phenomena. All right, and then two, have you personally, or does anybody you know, have they ever seen what they legitimately believe to be an unidentified aerial vehicle, which is what the government calls it, not UFO. That's a civilian term. All right. Anyway, and then we gave them the choice of, yes, I personally have. No, but I know someone who sincerely believes they have. And then, no, I have never, and I don't know anybody who ever has. All right. And then 3, regardless of your views on visitations and sightings, do you believe extra intelligent life exists somewhere else other than on planet Earth? Really interesting stuff. And I mean, we even called that section, for those of you who read it, because I shared the questionnaire with some of you, we even called it Out of This World. So we'll prompt people, whether it's on phone or online, we'll prompt them. We'll say, all right, next section, Out of This World. All right. Awesome. This is what we have seen in 2017. This is what is going on Capitol Hill. And we very much would like to get your views on. Here's something that jumped out at me immediately, at least as of right now. And I'll have to go and process it. Maybe ideology has something to do with it. And we're going to look. We'll look and we'll see. But immediately, I saw no difference between so-called backward, narrow-minded thinking Christians, the way they're characterized in media and entertainment, as being closed-minded and not being the open-minded secular liberal, right? Educated liberal. In fact, slightly more graduate liberals with higher education liberals tend to think this stuff is ridiculous. Whereas more Christian middle Americans, let's just be broad here, are open to the idea of extraterrestrial intelligent life. And immediately that jumped out at me because I'm going over some of these responses. It's Easter weekend. I peek at Good Friday. I look on Easter Sunday. That is not what you would expect, given the media and the entertainment industry's portrayal of Christians. And by the way, there's a follow-up. If you chose Protestant, other Christian, for religious affiliation, then you got funneled off via logic to another question. Would you describe yourself as born again or evangelical? And again, I don't see that being a major indicator on what determines how likely you are to believe in extraterrestrial life. That's pretty profound. I found that pretty profound. We also tested HR 1, and here's the general finding. People don't know what's in HR 1. All right, the media and the Democrats have done a very good job at making it seem like something they may be able to get behind. When you begin to list all of the provisions in HR 1, Americans do not support it. And then we circle back and we say, supporters say it does this, which is basically expand voter access to voting. And opponents say it does this, which is ban photo identification, effectively. Nullify the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 because it makes, for those who don't know, it makes it very difficult to remove those dirty rolls from the voter files that we are always talking about and going over. And it seeks to overall point of the bill which Americans do not agree with. The overall point of the bill is to expand federal authority over the way elections are conducted in this country. And most Americans understand that elections are conducted in the legislature, and most Americans understand the Constitution, or at least they instinctively know and understand the Constitution provides that to be the case. So when we say, do you support HR 1 after knowing these things, the answer is no. So what do you think? All right, Robert, I started to get into this. I don't know if you heard, so let me just recap to you real quick. This would have all been tied up with a nice pretty bow by now for us to show everybody. And you know this because you've worked with me, Mal, for years. I don't believe people. Okay, so what is your annual income? What is your party registration? I don't believe them. So it gets deduped against, consumer files, voter files. And if we can at least, we will double check them. Well, that's a script. And when you write the application, it's a script, and it says, look, here is the variable I'm looking for. Let's call it EDU. It stands for education in column ZX of the voter file. I mean, this is how, down it is. And check against it. If the value is empty, then fine. If it has a value and it's not empty in the data table, then send us the value. And we want to know whether someone's lying to us. Like, we have had 18-year-old black girls tell us they are 65-year-old white women. Okay, I mean, we know they're lying. All right, so this happens more than it should. It's not totally common, but I won't publish something that I don't 100% stand behind, let alone even bother taking the time to process it. So I gotta eat it, buddy. It is what it is. But we collected quite a bit before I realized the script was broken. So I had to go back and do it again. And this is the first time I've ever done this, Robert. I'm not going to lie. I was so angry. I don't lose my cool very much anymore. When I was younger, I had a temper. Boy, I flipped, man. I had to realize, okay, today is the day for the Lord. Calm down. So I had to, and we made it work. It's just that it's not 100% processed yet, but there's very clearly things that I can see already, which you heard about. And then also, get this, because people had said, more than one person asked me if we have ever polled belief in extraterrestrial life, or whether people think that aliens are sightings are like really extraterrestrial intelligent life forms, or can they be explained through human action and phenomena. There is no, and the media portrays Christians as like backward and closed-minded. In fact, it is the white educated liberal who is closed-minded to the idea of extraterrestrial intelligent life. That stunned me, Robert. There is no difference between overall registered voters and those who identify as Protestant Christians, the backward ones, And then we even asked whether or not they consider themselves as born again or evangelical. What do you think about that? Right before we move into anything else, what do you think about that, man? That's crazy to me, Robert.
Well, just in general, what's interesting about the born again question is how steady it's been. Despite reporting of decline of evangelicalism and decline of religious conservatism, what there's been a decline of is liberals going to church. That's what there's been a decline of. There's been no decline of evangelicals or evangelicalism in America for at least 50 years. You could argue about whether it's less than the 20s, but but generally speaking, that about 20 to 25% of the population will identify as born again or evangelical. And that number has been incredibly steady, despite predictions that it was going to disappear and it was going to be gone and so forth.
Yeah.
Never has. It stayed very steady. Now, that's in part because of the self-segregation of religious conservative communities beginning in the 1970s, that they realized before a lot of other people did the threat of public education, the threat of public culture, that politics was downstream from culture. And so they started, having their kids go to church, not only be in church, but be church-based social activities, Awanas, other things like that, sort of their own version of the Boy Scouts, their own version of other activities, creating a sort of not going to Hollywood films, not watching a lot of mainstream television, not being super active in social media space, even when it came on board, starting their own elementary schools, then their middle schools, then high schools, as well as colleges and universities. So they understood before anyone else the problem of the contamination of culture by a politically corrosive ideology. And that's why evangelicals are generally unmoved and unbudged, both in percentages of the population and in terms of their own internal belief structure, outside of your Frenchies of the world, but David Frenchy types. But they don't really count. There's only a few of them.
No, he doesn't.
So
regionally,
and it wouldn't surprise,
Robert, he wouldn't end up with the rest of them. Like regionally, he would be separated in gross minority if we were to wait. Like French is probably the kind of guy who would mock this stuff.
Yeah, and he lives in Tennessee, but on behalf of the state of Tennessee, we reject him.
Does he? Does he live in Tennessee?
Yeah, I'm going to file. He wasn't born there, to my knowledge. I think I'm going to look at a petition to deport him. Maybe to New York, maybe to California, some state like that. To circulate, but also then you have the church-going evangelicals and you have the cultural evangelicals, which are two totally different groups. Even though there's a lot of cultural overlap in those constituencies, the church-going evangelicals are much more Ted Cruz voters, whereas your cultural evangelicals are a large part of the heart of the Trump base, would likely identify ancestrally as American when asked for the census, as an example. That not right. English, not nothing else, just American, and heavily present in Appalachia, but also rural working class America. But it would not surprise me that people who self-describe as evangelical, either amongst churchgoers or culturally, are open to the possibility of life on other planets because their religious beliefs don't foreclose it. And unlike secular liberals, they don't let the gatekeepers dictate what they are allowed to think.
Yeah, one of the two-way responses that I looked at, because online we didn't give for the online portion, didn't give an open-ended, and now I wish I had, but it's like by the time you already collect enough, you can't start, halfway. But on two-way interactions and on phones, you really can pry. And one guy said, hold on, give me a second. Jesus said, "My Father's house has many rooms." That's what he said. Isn't that awesome?
That's going to become, and there is, among certain conspiracy theorists, they interpret some of the Old Testament as being about aliens helping to bring about the population. So it's in fact, it's an ancient alien belief.
I was
a
just
lot
going to
of
say that
different people believe in it.
What's Enoch? Robert, the Book of Enoch didn't make it in the
giants.
New version.
They're giants that came down, and they interpret those phrases and references to giants as being from another planet, as being extraterrestrial. So that wouldn't surprise me that much, even though sort of the X-Files was sort of hip. But X-Files is another generation too. There might be a generational gap. You might see like upscale liberals that are either millennials or boomers deny extraterrestrial belief ideas, but Gen Xers do. That'd be an interesting subcategory.
That's interesting. Let's check that out. Yeah, we could do that.
I'd be curious.
That we can nest.
That would be the X-Files influence.
That's really cool. We could nest those variables, and we absolutely could be able to see. That I'm suspicious of that. I mean, or at least I suspect that you're right on that. Actually, you have that 1990s. Hell, even my generation. You have that the X-Files generation, and they're very open to that, and even their kids.
It was pop. Who are his kids grew up on ET. Just a different. From about. And then what was the Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Steven Spielberg. Yeah.
I think if you grew up Gen X, then you had a very different perspective of if politics is downstream from culture. Culture was okay with the idea of extraterrestrial life being on the planet for Gen Xers. It wasn't for boomers, and it wasn't for millennials. And so I'd be curious to see whether that shows up at all in the generational cohort of polling data. But I think it's a fun polling question to get to. Now, I'm assuming that early on we're probably seeing the same results we saw when you did the Georgia polling, which is that all of the election reforms that Georgia law passed, and frankly, my view, they didn't go far enough. But there are almost in every case still more open ballots in Georgia than there is in New York in terms of election laws, election rules. Almost twice as much early voting time period allowed.
Yep.
No excuse. Yep. Mail-in balloting still allowed. Signature matches no longer strictly enforced. They're going to require ID, but their way of getting that is pretty easy to do if you. It's easy to steal. It's even easier now to steal a mail-in ballot than it was before.
Yep.
Then that's why it shows you how nuts they are that they're panicking about any attempt to impose any restrictions whatsoever on the ballot process, even ones that are much more liberalized than New York. That they're going nuts. But I assume the polling data, at least the early preliminary data, shows that all of those reforms are extremely popular, including within the African American community.
Absolutely, it's going to be overwhelming. And here's the thing: so what we found is that people don't really know what HR1 is, and so to those who did, it seemed like they had this idea, expanded voting access, right? And that really polls well. People are like, well, yeah, we need to expand voter access. They don't even know what the hell it means, but they're like, yeah, we got to do that. But then when you start to say, okay, proponents say it does this, expand voter access, and limit people from unfairly being able to be removed from the rolls. Critics say it does this. And we literally gave them the text of the bill and said a fair reading would do this. Now, do you support HR1? No. Because I think what I suspect it is that people believe the voter rolls need to be strictly maintained. That's number one. We know this from other questioning, and it does effectively neuter the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 that requires states to maintain rolls, even though they all do it differently. But that photo identification question and the 16 and 17-year-old voting is so unpopular, it kills it. So the idea that they're not
no, HR 1 is creating the opportunity to expand who can vote. Prisoners can vote. Felons can vote.
Yep.
It expands the
We
means
pulled that
of
as well.
voting. It federalizes elections, so state rules no longer apply in any federal election context. And so when people know that the issue of voter access is whether or not voter ID is required, they have no problems with that being required, because it's required to get on a plane. It's required to cash a check. It's required to live daily. They don't understand the idea that you wouldn't require voter ID. On the other hand, and when they find out what they mean by expanded voter access is minors or criminals, they're like or people that are cluttered in the rolls. They're not. They're hold on a second. So I mean that's where the HR 1 is going to be very unpopular. Georgia's when the substance is known, and Georgia's election rule changes are going to be very popular, which makes what the corporate America is doing quite extraordinary.
And people do, though, and we asked this along with people who are incarcerated, right? We asked, what about people who committed felonies but now are out of jail? You know, I forgot exactly how we worded it, but it's not right in front of me at the moment. But, you know, we wanted to know whether Americans did believe in second chances, and that will be supported. I mean, there's no way.
Yeah, that isn't surprising.
Process.
It's just people voting from jail is what people have.
It's a problem, Robert. It's a real problem. People are like, wait a minute. No, they have a debt to pay to society.
Well, and
they
not only that,
be
the
having
fear is that how can you trust that vote? The person's voting inside jail. I mean, the motivations to steal those ballots by corrupt prisoners or corrupt wardens or corrupt gangs.
It'll be a racket.
Yeah, it's just not a safe place to place a vote.
It'll definitely be a racket, Robert. And then the immigration policies we included, generally speaking, do you approve or disapprove?
I assume they weren't in favor of non-citizens voting.
No. And even people who are here legally but still are not citizens, which is another element to this debate a lot of people don't understand. It's not just whether or not you are an illegal immigrant. It's whether let's say you do reside here legally, but you're still not a U.S. citizen. Democrats want them to have the right to vote. The American people say no. And then on immigration specifically, it looks like people have a problem with how Joe is handling the border. I actually was wondering whether or not people, including people who approve of the job he's doing, which is incredible. So I was wondering whether or not people would even know that much about this story right now. Is it a Fox and Newsmax story, kind of thing? But it does seem people understand the border's a mess under Joe Biden. Now, we also asked whether or not people thought it was, tell us whether or not this is sound immigration policy during a debate. And we gave them a strongly agree, a strongly disagree scale, or unsure, no opinion. Of course, we always give them, right? And we asked them whether or not they believed it is smart for U.S. policy to encourage the illegal migration of unvaccinated, migration of unvaccinated migrants from South America to the United States at this time. People are, people who are concerned about the pandemic, Robert, who voted for Joe Biden. I know, and I can see that these are Biden voters. They'll still tell you they're supportive of what he has been doing. This is a failure on Republican messaging, because it was this, and it was also whether or not you thought now was the appropriate time to discuss amnesty when we have more than 10 million Americans out of work. And even these voters, big percentages of Biden's own voters, are like, what? And it's like they're hearing it for the first time, man. They're hearing it for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a failure of messaging.
No doubt about that. Because the pandemic specific issues create unique vulnerabilities for Biden on immigration, especially, and the failure to meaningfully assess that or address that in a consistent. But it's because who really is the leader of the Republican Party right now? I mean, there really isn't one. Trump is sort of the leader in exile, but he has a very haphazard organization and has no social media access, and didn't really have a turnkey system like some of us thought he would. So, only a small percentage of people even see what he's talking about. So then you're left with McConnell, who nobody wants to hear from, Kevin McCarthy, who nobody cares about. And the more telegenic, popular ones like Matt Gaetz are under massive media political onslaught at the moment. And so the net effect is you don't have really anybody making smart advocacy on behalf of the conservative anti-Biden messaging.
We can circle back to the polling in a bit, but there are people who wanted us to address this, because we did on Friday, or was it Wednesday, on Inside the Numbers briefly, because we did know some things about it. But then you have this guy who's turning on him in Florida. I saw you did a podcast with Viva Barnes. You did a show on this. Why don't you dumb it down for people real quick? What's going on with Matt Gaetz?
Sure. So I mean, basically, Gaetz has a reputation as a bit of a partier, as a bit of a ladies' man.
Which is why he came to Katie Hill's defense, by the way, for those of you who are wondering why he defended Representative Hill. It's because he wouldn't want pictures of him spread around either.
Yes.
Nor would I.
Scion of a prominent political family in Florida, and the sort of inheritor to the populist throne in a lot of people's estimations. And because of his family's political legacy, and because of his telegenic skill set, and his access to independent wealth, I think his father's worth more than $500 million at least, conservatively. He was someone who was seen as like a Kennedy-style populist that could replace Trump once Trump left the political scene. And there was talk of him running for Secretary of Agriculture in Florida in 2022, using that as a platform to run for governor in 2026, and then using that as a platform to run for president in 2032. And there were a lot of people circling him in that capacity. And what was quite unique about him is that, unlike Rubio, unlike Scott, unlike pretty much every other, even to some degree, not as much, Hawley and Cruz, he was willing to be pretty consistently populist in challenging power structures in D.C., challenging McConnell, challenging his own caucus, challenging deep state apparatus, sat on the Judiciary Committee, Trump's most effective advocate against impeachment, Trump's most effective advocate on a large number of the election issues. And so, given that, some of us had told people in his camp to be, hyper cognizant that, at some point he's going to be a target of the machine. They're not going to let him continue to rise unabated. And here he is on the eve of announcing potentially for the Secretary of Agriculture position as of 6 months ago. I think it was Secretary of Agriculture, because that's the one that controls guns in Florida, right?
Yes, it is. And Democrats took it with what many people believed, even prominent Republicans like Marco Rubio and Rick Scott, that Broward County, which is this is why Brenda Snipes really lost her job, because that's big sugar and gun rights activists' position in Florida. So if Big Sugar wants their voice heard and their policies implemented, it's the agricultural slot, Robert, and then they also handle even concealed weapons permits go through that office. So it was a major loss, and even prominent mainstream Republicans not only believe, they'll tell you they know that Democrats robbed that seat in 2018 through Broward County when Brenda Snipes found all of those ballots later on in the night.
So Gaetz is always back. So, the place to exploit Gaetz was to try to target the fact that his ladies' man reputation, see what pops up. And in that context, he had an association with the tax collector for Seminole County, who appears, if the indictments are true, is your classic old school grifter who used his position to do all kinds of criminality because he controlled the tax collector, I guess, controlled access to what he said he was going to upgrade everybody's records to blockchain to be more secure. Instead, he used it to, steal people's IDs for other people's purposes, diverted money according to the federal indictment, the diverted money that wasn't going to blockchain. It was going to his crypto accounts. Then, while he's under investigation, decides to bribe some federal officials to get some fake loans under PPP. There's a lot of that went around. And then in the middle of all this, they had only one charge, as I recall, that there was somebody underage that he sent to somebody else for commercial sexual activity that he helped secure a false identification for. So But that's all that was. Somehow that led to an investigation where it's not clear whether Gates was ever a target or whether it was just the subject. In other words, this guy, the Greenberg guy, gives off the hallmarks to me of your grifter, extorter personality.
Sure, yeah.
He has popped up in other places. I won't mention his name, but there's a certain South Florida political consultant who gets himself into undue trouble, and I tell people to be careful dealing with him. So I'll just leave it at that. Look at why he was publicly disgraced about 15 years ago, what clubs he was going to.
Yeah.
So that's why I've defended him in a wide range of contexts. But I worked with him on one case, and that was enough for me.
It's a little hard now, buddy. It's a little hard.
Yes.
You know? I mean, it's just a little hard.
Yes, no doubt. No, and people have to be very, very careful in this world of who they associate and affiliate with, and particularly be careful going to parties and events and things like that. So Gates supposedly is under federal investigation, according to the New York Times, for whether or not a 17-year-old that he was dating traveled across state lines and he paid for her travel. And that appears to be the only actual substantive investigation. Now, brilliantly, they've politically turned that into sex trafficking minors. The federal law is not quite clear on this. Sexual abuse of a minor requires the person be 15 or under. So that's not even the basis of an investigation. Many states in America have the age of consent is 17 years of age. Around the world, 17 is closer to the norm than 18. So, if they know, if they say allegation is Gates had 17-year-old girlfriend, a lot of people, there's people that don't like that, but they're not going to get up in arms. Whereas sex trafficking a minor sounds a whole lot different. And great political attack. It looks like what happened is, so they put him under inquiry, purportedly. Apparently, another gift of Bill Barr, the guy who maybe the worst attorney general in history, covered up for the Bidens, covered up Spygate, failed to do anything, covered up everything related to the elections, and while he's helping instigate investigations of Trump's friends and allies. And maybe next time Trump will think twice about who he appoints, but who knows whether that's going to happen given who's in his inner circle currently. How's that working out for you? How'd that work out at the Supreme Court today? Where only Thomas is writing about the problem of Section 230.
I was going to get into that too. Yeah,
and we'll transition to that a little bit later. My latest grievance against the bad appointees that Trump made, and the reason for it is to educate Trump world. This has got to change, or what's the point of letting Trump run the populist movement if he's not running an actual populist movement? If he looks like William Jennings Bryan, 1897, he's not that. William Jennings Bryan failed populism long term. Andrew Jackson made it happen, and that's because of what happened after he lost. But then it leads into, all these people have deep state fingerprints that start showing up in the extortion part of the operation. So how this case ended up a federal case in the first place is weird. Even with the state guy, it was kind of weird. It was like most of these charges look like state charges. And you got to wonder, why is it the state attorney general doing it? Why is it the local county DA doing it? Why are the feds obsessed with what this tax collector in Florida is doing? Why is the Secret Service involved? All of that seemed odd to begin with. When the case first came out, it felt like federal targeting. It felt like somebody and maybe the real reason they were going after Greenberg was to squeeze Gates and hoping that because Greenberg is affiliated with Gates. That leads to a supposed investigation of Gates, which somehow magically gets leaked to key people who show up with Mueller and Russian oligarchs and doing grifter schemes to get out Levinson, who's been dead in Iran by all accounts for a decade.
Incredible, Robert. Everybody, even just when Trump went over this with Levinson, it's sad to say, but all indications is Levinson is dead. What the hell are they talking about?
And these guys keep hustling millions and millions and millions. Yeah. And there's got to be something else going on here, because Mueller was connected to it before. The Russian oligarch that was connected to Ukraine Gate and that was connected to Russia Gate was involved in it.
Yep.
High-ranking former intelligence officials, FBI agents, justice officials are involved. Something is going on here other than what it looks like and what it appears to be. And I don't think it could be just a grift. It's got to be something else. So you can't put it past that. People should watch the movie or read the book Taylor of Panama by John Le Carre, which is spelled Lecar, Lekarre. For sometimes these guys just grift. That's what sometimes they do. But all of these are deep state actors. So they're suddenly in the middle of an extortion scheme against Gates and his family. So and all of this is supposed. Well, but don't worry. The people at the Rising, Crystal Ball has told me that this has nothing political about it whatsoever. She knows. The same person who told you the pandemic was legitimate and you should be terrified and do everything the politicians tell you. The same person that told you the election was totally on the up and clean is now telling you there can't be anything political in the Matt Gaetz case. The Rising probably needs a new name. I don't think it survived Easter Sunday. So it continues
supposed
to
be populist, Robert. Supposed to be populist. And I've been
what
on
a
there.
crock.
We had a good conversation.
It's the only populism they'll do is something that's sort of Joe Rogan approved. Sort of your low level. They'll talk about Hunter Biden. They'll talk about things like that. They won't do is broach anything that the institutions really oppose. So they're kind of, they would be called fake in a different place, sort of disinformation, to appear to be populist, but actually be effective gatekeepers about really the more radical revolutionary populist issues. But I just watched it briefly because YouTube bombards me with it. And I was like, this is the same. How are these takes so predictable that if it's something like this, where it's a real dividing line, where anybody watching should be politically suspicious. Well, Hunter Biden is walking clear of all the different crimes he committed. The feds are just legitimately obsessed with whether or not Matt Gaetz dated a 17-year-old and paid her airfare. And by the way, under federal law, if he didn't know she was under 18, he can't be charged with a federal crime. So that's a complete.
Did you hear that? He cannot. Let's say he fully thought she was 18, 19 years old. If he did not know that she was 17, then you can't. Well, Laura and I were debating this. I think I was either Friday or Wednesday.
There's some
we were going over the
rape
code.
laws that are different under state law, but that's not the applicable count here.
About their age.
Yeah, it's not applicable. Okay. Yeah, well, the bottom line is this is a funny reading of the law, Robert. I mean, we were reading it online. I'm not a lawyer, but trying to make some sense to it. Reading it on the show because people are like, I don't understand how what they're saying here. How could they? It seems like a stretch. And to me, it smells like, Robert, it smells like this. You have these people who leave these positions in government, whether it's at Maine and Justice, right, or it's at the Bureau, and then they go and they work for private law firms, but they still exude power over the agencies that they worked at. And their friends who remain there. For people who don't believe me, go and look up we reported on People's Planet Daily, but Judicial Watch has the whole cache of those emails from when Rod Rosenstein decided to appoint Robert Mueller as a special counsel. And you will see law firms just like his just drumming the inbox of Rod Rosenstein. New York, D.C. kind of law firms just drumming and filling up his inbox, pressuring him to appoint a special counsel. And eventually you can see Rosenstein buckles. And when he does, his very first email is to a lawyer just like me. So this idea that, it's ridiculous. What would this lawyer Of course they do. It's just like a general who leaves the military, goes to work for a contractor on the base or something, on the same base. He still wields power over the people that he used to have command over. I mean, this is because they're friends. This is how the game works. So it looks to me like you have the feds open an investigation, and I'm not saying, and I don't mean this in any way as to whether or not something Matt Gaetz did was legitimate or not. All right. I don't know yet. I don't know the details, but it sounds like it's a good racket where you can open up an investigation, then get your friends to extort a prominent political family whom you disagree with, by the way, with whom you disagree. All right. And then you make $25 million.
Who's seen as the biggest young threat to the deep state. I mean, years ago, Bobby Kennedy Jr. was on the rise. And they find some drugs on him on a plane and totally get him discredited very early on, right at the very what would have otherwise been the cusp of his rise. He exits politics, never goes back in after that. Does anybody think that's a coincidence? Those kind of things, you find some. some vice of some type or something you can label a vice in some type, and you smear the person. I mean, what they've done is, even if it turns out he's completely innocent, this has done severe damage. His ability to survive this is really a long shot at this point.
It's tough.
He could easily survive it legally, but politically, the label, you search Matt Gaetz in the future, the first 8 of the first 10 articles will be sex trafficking minors. I mean that's that's why it's so difficult. It's in that way and that suggests that was their whole objective, because on the eve of when they thought they were going to get payment, they leaked it. So that suggests that they were I bet they wanted to get payment as evidence of guilt. That was the goal. Because this often is the case with extortionists when they're government backed. The extortion is actually a scheme to be used against you. I've seen it in cases I've been involved with, where my client was smart enough not to take the bait, but that was the entire objective all along. It was later confirmed. So I think that was the goal. And when they realized, I think there's a war within the Justice Department. One side is defending Gaetz, the other side is going after Gaetz. And the side going after Gaetz got wind that the side for defending Gaetz had set up their people for a potential extortion trap. And that's why they leaked it. How do you tip off somebody not to take the trap, not to take the meeting, not to take the money? You leak to the New York Times, oh, by the way, here's what here's what that information you were trying to get payment for. It's a way of sending a message. Comey did this over and over again. Kept using and McCabe, same thing. Stroke, same thing. Kept using the media to send a message to someone so they couldn't be accused of doing or saying anything.
Right.
Roger Stone might have learned that lesson. Don't text directly next time, Roger. You can always talk to the press. And everybody gets the message. So that's what I think they're doing. And so the evidence that Gaetz is innocent is he didn't pay them off, didn't try to keep it quiet.
Yeah, that's what sticks with me.
Was nervous and emotionally discordant on Tucker. The worse you perform the first time you're accused, the stronger the sign that you're innocent, not that you're guilty.
Yeah.
If you want to see what guilty looks like, look at either Bill Clinton or Hunter Biden describing his laptop. Hunter had
the timing of the sting, Robert. The timing of the sting.
All
People
of
should
it.
understand the New
All
York
of it
Times
smells.
dropped that story the day before the sting operation he claims was going to have. So, and these people claim to have connections to the White House. So, if you really want to protect Biden, of course. I mean, can we stop the crap? Of course they do. All right. Of course this is how Democrats play. This is something that Republicans are never going to learn. They play for keeps, man. And it's not just them. It's like you said before, it's really a matter of a police state issue, and they happen to be the party of the police state right now. I am getting bombarded though, real quick. So let me just say, all right, I don't have a firm number for you yet, guys, but I am going to say that I think Biden's going to end up between 48 to 52%. And I actually don't have here's the thing. There are more people who strongly disapprove of him than there are who strongly approve. It's going to be about his intensity index is probably going to be about -3 or -5. But there's a lot of people, Robert, who could collapse on him at any moment.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll somewhat approve people.
He's still where he was at the election time.
Yeah,
so the people who didn't vote for him don't support him. The people who did vote for him still do. But he doesn't have much impassioned support. I mean, that's why they had to change the election rules in order to get voters to vote for him. Normally, that lack of passion would kill you. It has always been political death throughout all of American political history. It wasn't this cycle because they changed the rules to liberalize the number of ballots that could come in to substitute for lack of passion. But if they don't have, that's why they're panicking about the rules. They know they're not going to have passion for them in 2022. So they knew if it happened right now, they lose the governorships of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and Georgia and Arizona, and Florida's going to be safely Republican anyway at this point. But and probably
St. Pete can kiss it. That's
exactly. So the only way they're going to be able to sustain, and the only way they keep the House or stay 50-50 in the Senate is with liberalized election rules, because they do not have. They've continued to antagonize the impassioned part of their base. So millennials are less and less impassioned about the election, and they're the low propensity turnout group, along with African Americans and Latinos, but particularly millennial African Americans and Latinos and millennials in general. And if they don't turn out in big numbers in 2022 because the voting system is not liberalized enough for them just to vote without thinking twice, then they're going to lose the House and the Senate as well. And they know that. And that's why they're panicking, because they can't gin up popular support, intense popular support. They think wokeism gets them that. And the problem is it's a misleading barometer. Social media enthusiasm doesn't create voter enthusiasm. That's why they're running into trouble.
Couldn't agree more. On favorables, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable to give some firm numbers on this, but the most unpopular leader in Congress is Mitch McConnell. It's not even close. And even though Nancy Pelosi has a higher, very unfavorable. So, Robert, it's going to be around 42 to 44% have a very unfavorable opinion of Nancy Pelosi. Not unfavorable altogether. Very. It's just the thing is that let me look real quick. Another only 13% say they have an unfavorable. With Mitch McConnell, he's 38% very unfavorable, and then another 20-something that's unfavorable. Nobody likes him. It's more than that, actually. Sorry.
And my assumption is that Biden still has better ratings than Harris does. And that's why they're not going to remove him anytime soon.
Harris is 42% very unfavorable. Yeah. 42%. So,
and I assume she doesn't have a high, very favorable rating.
Let's check right now. And again, this one isn't totally done, but I did look at it's not going to change a whole lot. Very favorable is 31.
Yeah.
That's it.
So she's much more underwater. And it's the reason why, however much people are speculating that Harris will replace Biden, not until
those numbers change.
Exactly. They have no Schumer's not popular, Pelosi's not popular, Harris is not popular. So they have nobody to replace Biden with, and they need a manageable figurehead. I mean, he's obviously a figurehead from terms of a policy perspective, so much so that we might end up in World War III or Ukraine if things keep going a certain direction. But which we can talk about a little bit later. But as long as he's the most popular Democrat on the national stage, Cuomo can't be a replacement. He's barely holding on. Newsom is going to face a recall. Whitmer's under federal criminal investigation. So their only choice is Biden. I know that some people think, well, maybe they'll bring Obama back. He wants to smoke pot, play video games, go to parties with Richard Branson. And get fat deals for sitting on boards and just pontificating and people saying, "Oh, the great Obama is here." There's only a part of him that's really political. It's the thing people never understood about him. He goes back and forth, back. Only his ego gets him involved in politics, which sporadically hits. But there's a part of his personality, and this has been true since he was a kid. If you read all the biographies, he always went back and forth in terms of hyperactivism. Only his ego could get him involved in that. He's not, as people like, even Limbaugh, I thought, was wrong about that. He imagined Obama was this real mastermind behind the scenes trying to influence things. The people around Obama want him to be that way. Valerie Jarrett wants him to be that way. His wife wants him to be that way. Other people around Obama himself, you can read some of the books written by some of their allies who talk about getting all mad because all Obama did was spend 10 hours smoking pot and playing video games 3 weeks after 2017. Because
he never talked to Congress. He hated doing his job. That's what everybody has told us. And even in the books,
sit around and say, "Oh wow, Obama's the smartest man I've ever met." That's it. Beyond that, he doesn't have that much ambition policy-wise. That's why
he's lazy.
And that's what people never understood. The people around him do. The whole West Wing TV show crowd do. But Obama himself was also really a figurehead. Less of a pure figurehead than Biden is. But that's only because Biden has dementia. They got to figure out milk and cookies and tea and nap time where they can stick them out in front of the cameras. When you got to give a guy a coloring book to do a press conference, you're in trouble. But what's even frightening is that this is basically the B team of people around Biden, and they're clearly going to. And the media's lies about Ukraine are really incredible. It's because it's where the neoliberals and the neocons unite. And so the gaslighting on this is off the charts.
The anti-corruption people in Ukraine, it's hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys in Ukraine because there aren't really good guys and bad guys. There are just
Not anymore.
bad guys and like better guys.
Correct. I mean,
But
people
the
don't know
anti-
the background
you
of
know.
Ukraine is it was all of these countries since the 1900s are colonially created countries that don't belong together. So
Yeah.
this is true throughout Africa. This is true throughout Europe or large parts of Eastern and Central Europe. Not as much now, but Ukraine is like Yugoslavia. It's a country that Stalin decided, I'm going to put together a bunch of the Russians in Eastern Ukraine with a bunch of the native Ukrainians in Western Ukraine, in part because they hate each other. So they have to depend on us, the Soviet Union, to keep them apart from one another. So once the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine did not make sense as a country. It had two groups of
At all.
populations that didn't like each other, didn't agree with each other, spoke different languages, came from different cultures. A lot of the people in Western Ukraine were on the Nazi side of the equation in World War II. A lot of them still celebrate they still
And
use
they still-
neo-Nazi symbols. I got a debate with this on Twitter. I was just pointing out that we actually sided with actual neo-Nazis in Ukraine in the coup of 2014, which I'll get into a little more detail for context. And someone's like, oh, no, that's not true. So I just cited the 20 different articles from every conceivable source: left, right, institutionalist, anti-establishment, social media, newspapers, public policy reports, white papers, by everybody across the spectrum, from BBC to CNN to antiwar.com to whomever else. All of them agree that there's a major neo-Nazi problem in Western Ukraine that was part of the coup in 2014. But so some background is Ukraine doesn't become a country until the Soviet Union. Wasn't really a country then. It becomes free in the 1990s. It's basically designed for the outside powers to manipulate either Russia or Europe or the West because of their inherent unmanageable, unsustainable divisions. And then it's compounded by the fact that economically, Ukraine, particularly Eastern Ukraine, but Ukraine, for the most part, as a country, depends on trade with Russia. And that's its main economic ally. But the European powers want to use NATO, and America wants to use NATO to help cause further problems in Russia using Ukraine as a proxy. And that's been going on all the way since the beginning of Ukraine. In the early 2000s, what changed the game, through the 90s, a lot of the people that are in positions of power now with Biden came of age politically during what I call the West Wing TV show era of the 1990s and Bill Clinton. And they were allowed to do whatever they wanted in Eastern Europe and Russia. And some critical context here is that extreme poverty went from the low single digits to the mid double digits every country we touched in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. And then that doesn't even count the disaster of Yugoslavia, where we get involved in the war. We end up, we help sort of do things that instigate the civil war, then use it as a pretext to go in and do bombing, then do a lot of things that a lot of people would say undermined a lot of our policies. We lied to the Soviets and said, look, you disband the Soviet Union, we won't expand NATO. Then that's exactly what we do throughout the 1990s, making Russians scared that this is an attempt to put hostile troops on their border. And then we also give the right of independent sovereignty. We say, hey, if you want to be your own country, just declare yourself your own country. That's how we get Albanian, Croatian, Bosnian, Herzegovinian, all of that to break up Yugoslavia. But that sets a precedent that we did decide we don't like when it comes to Crimea down the road. But we're the ones who set that precedent. So we're the ones who set the precedent of intervening on behalf of a national group that wants to unilaterally declare its sovereignty in the Yugoslavian battles. So that leads to the 2000s. What changes is Putin. So when Yeltsin was in charge, we're just going to ravage and rape Russia and all of Central and Eastern Europe for our resources. The Clinton, you can imagine, Bill Clinton had his eyes as big as saucers thinking about how much money he was going to make through the Clinton Foundation in Russia. Putin steps in and stops it all. Stops the oligarchs running the system, stops the corruption, stops the rape of Russia, economically makes them independent, and the neoliberal and neocon elites in America have never forgiven him for it. It's why they really hate him. It has nothing to do with anything else internally in Russia. And then they decide to start using Ukraine as a proxy. And the way they start using Ukraine as a proxy is they start to do color revolutions. There's a range of them, partially done through the Einstein Institute out of Boston, which is all about which is CIA backed and funded. A lot of great ideas they taught, but they're how to destabilize governments. The Orange Revolution, Velvet Revolution, one color revolution after the other. Ukraine is one of the key test cases. They accuse Russia of trying to poison one person, which is highly improbable. And what you have is an underlying tinderbox that is Ukraine. That Ukraine is still dependent on Russia. Europe wants to use their free trade relationships of Ukraine to access and destabilize the Russian economy through access to Ukraine and destabilize Ukraine as a political proxy to destabilize Russia and Putin in particular. So that's where it becomes sort of a turnkey problem. The oligarchs take over in Ukraine in the 90s, and unlike Putin's Russia, nobody ever brings the oligarchs to heel in Ukraine. So you end up with this culturally divided, economically divided, politically divided, ethnically divided, religiously divided nation to its core, further amplifying that and that being manipulated for the purposes of external involvement and political corruption, where actually corrupt oligarchs, no matter who wins, runs the show. Doesn't matter whether it's the Russian side, Western side. Wow, the neo-Nazi movement in Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine starts to build and build. These are people that still celebrate actual Nazi supporters from the 30s. They start building and building. They become anti-Semitic, anti-Russian, anti-Putin. And we start aligning with them under the W administration, but that accelerates under the W administration will try to mess around with Georgia. That backfires with South Ossetia and other countries. But that won't stop Obama administration from accelerating it. Again, they see it as a beautiful pot for corruption. It's not a coincidence that Joe Biden has made. So in 2014,
that's number one, Robert. That's number one.
Absolutely.
Corruption. Just make sure it exists. That's number one.
Exactly. The Maiden Revolution had a lot of false news around it. It was basically what happens is the U.S. sponsors a coup with the aid of neo-Nazis and false flags. That's the short answer. You can watch Ukraine on Fire, the sort of left perspective from Oliver Stone. You can watch others. You can watch the show The Gaggle, which gets into some of these details with Peter Lavelle and George Samueli, sort of international intellectuals, public intellectuals who follow these matters in greater detail. Samueli did a big book about what happened, the disaster, what happened in the Balkans. And these are people with unique historical and life experiences that make them particularly well-informed perspectives. But effectively what happens, we sponsor a coup in 2014. And of course, Eastern Ukraine has no interest in this because the person overthrown was the person that they helped just elect. They have no interest in the economic problems it's going to bring about, the cultural problems, political problems. So they rise up and want to be independent. It creates a civil war for several years. Crimea uses the example of what happened in Yugoslavia and says, okay, the West established that we have a right to declare our own sovereignty and declare our own country and decide who we're going to be part of. And we hold a referendum and a plebiscite, and over 90% of us want to be in Russia. Not a surprise, since Crimea is like 98% ethnic Russian. These are people who have no interest in never had any interest in being part of Ukraine. This was an experiment they didn't care for after the 1990s. So that's not a surprise. Putin is happy to say we're taking back Ukraine. There's finally a ceasefire reached because the problem they have is that all of far eastern Ukraine, the Donbass and other regions, are natively Russian, ethnically Russian, economically Russian, culturally Russian, speak Russian. They think the democratic experiment in Ukraine has utterly failed, and especially failed them. And they would rather be part of Russia. And Russia has resisted that because they don't want to be accused of going onto Ukrainian soil, of expanding their territorial power, of having Europe cut them off entirely. So that's the only thing that's kept Russia at bay, because going into the Donbass would be extremely popular within Russia because these are Russians. There's no real example. It's more like Texas in the 1830s. That's the way to think, where Americans are 80% of the population, which actually wasn't that American at the time, but that was very popular to annex Texas in the United States because it was considered American, despite the fact that, by recent territorial sovereignty, it was Mexico and Spain. So it's the St. Louisiana, the French Louisiana Purchase, same situation and circumstance. California, ultimately same circumstance and situation. Ultimately, Alaska, same circumstance and situation. So that's how they see Eastern Ukraine. Putin has resisted because he doesn't want to burn all bridges to Europe. But it's not because of internal resistance. Not only that, tactically and strategically, as Obama himself admitted, any sort of escalatory situation along the Russian border, Russia wins. NATO's not going to actually try to go to war. None of Germany's and France is not going to try to go to war. They're not going to actually militarily intervene. And the United States has a long history of encouraging these kind of conflicts in these regions for political purposes and not intervening, like the Kurds, and for good cause. I mean, do we really want a ground war? But what happened is they cut a ceasefire. Germany and France and Russia had negotiated that. Trump behind the scenes supported it, even though people around Trump didn't want it, didn't like it. And Ukraine for the last month, because the comedian who got elected president has failed to reform the oligarchs, is trying to distract from his problems, has been sending the army back towards Donbass. And that's what triggered the Russians responding. The Russians were like, no, don't try thinking about breaking the ceasefire and invading Donbass and having a bunch of dead people again, because that's not going to happen. And that's why he started putting all of his troops around. And was making it clear, if you go into the Donbass and break the ceasefire, we'll go in. And even if it means burning the bridges with Europe, fine. We'll go in. We'll go in a little further because we'll take the Black Sea back. And, if we're going to be cut off from Europe and the U.S., we might as well get the benefits.
We might as well. Yeah.
And not only that, the other thing he'll do is he'll send him right into the welcoming arms of China. This is why it was tactically stupid politics that our deep state has been pursuing. We want Russia trying to be European because it's advantageous to us long-term via China. China wants Europe and the U.S. to so antagonize and cut off Russia that its only place to go is China. And energy cost will skyrocket if in Western Europe if they don't have access to Russian oil. They're cutting off their nose despite their face. So that's where we're at. But there's people within the Biden administration that think that Putin will just back down, that think that they can use this to completely discredit Russia and force Russia into an alliance with China, that don't care about Ukraine, or that think they could win a war. Remember, in early 1960s, they were brainstorming ways to win nuclear wars. It was only because John Kennedy was like, no. I'm not going to be the president to lead to World War III. But for that, and of course, he ended up shot not long after. But for that, we would have probably been in actual nuclear war, because that's how genius our political generals were. So that's the real backstory of Ukraine. The media is going to spin it as Russian aggression, Putin aggression, and all the nonsense, because both the neoliberals and the neocons want war in Russia because they think it would profit them, because they're that mentally diseased. And Biden's administration is so absent. It's sleeping. There is nobody at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, other than some dogs pooping and biting people when it's not Biden doing it. So that's where we're at. So we're at the closest place we've been to triggering an international conflict of global scale since World War II, thanks to the dangerous incompetence of the Biden administration.
I gotta bring. Let me get my side by side. Yeah, real quick on that. With Trump losing, Zelensky's in deep trouble. So when the whole, you could call it Russiagate 2.0, the impeachment over Ukraine, that was a bad sign for them. So people should understand Vladimir Zelensky was elected to root out corruption. That corruption was all of the people that the Bush and then later Obama wing in D.C., the foreign policy establishment, they are the friends of those corrupt actors that we backed over those years. And whether they're, got racial aspects to their ideology or not, it's really all about who's going to play ball and be more corrupt. Poroshenko, the most recent regime, they were backed by Obama and Biden. Those people, the Biden people, did not want Vladimir Zelensky to win. The U.S. foreign policy establishment did not want him to win. They were hoping he'd play ball. Now he's just pinned up against her. Look, Ukraine was always going to be a hard place to clean up, Robert, but without a U.S. ally, that is why Zelensky was so happy on that call with Donald Trump, and thank God, and yes, please send Rudy over. He was overwhelmed. He's a freaking comedian. And he just got elected in a landslide to upset the apple cart. And he needed somebody's help. He needed somebody. That's the truth.
The practical solution that has always been the case in Ukraine has been to devolve into a federalized government that has a very weak national government, because you have basically 3 states within a state.
That's right.
You have
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Eastern
they do.
Ukraine, that's basically Russia. You have Central Ukraine, that's a real mixed, and then you have Western Ukraine, that's Ukrainian. And really, you know, and Kiev happens to be in the geographic western part of the country, and that's why the coup could take place so easily. And so there were and we should never be associating with neo-Nazis. Just a general principle.
Just
John
figuring
McCain
it
was
out.
happy to run over there and do it, just like he was doing it with ISIS. I mean, you know, the Obama administration was happy to do it. I remember when I first heard that allegation, I knew a decent bit about Ukraine, but not tons. And I was like, that can't be the case. And then I started researching. I was like, oh, this is not even in dispute. These are open neo-Nazis. And the U.S. government is funding them and helping them rise to power. And now they're back in. And it's not a coincidence. Victoria Nuland helped involved in Russiagate. And as you mentioned, Ukraine Gate was really Russiagate 2.0, is now back involved. And so you have the same bad actors back involved. And they would love to prove, the deep state is eager to prove itself. That's sort of what imperialistic existentialism, as they called Kissinger's philosophy in the book about Kissinger's shadow. These people really believe in that. They want to see action for the sake of action. They want public vindication for that action. They had to sit on the sidelines for 4 years while that terrible orange man, bad buffoon Trump prevented them from doing what they wanted to do, from playing with their toys. They got all these wonderful toys, little missiles, little bombs, little planes, little tanks, little espionage. And it's not a coincidence. They thought they could use Navalny to destabilize Putin internally. And when Navalny's as popular as Lyndon LaRouche ever was.
You and I have talked about this. I have polled Russia in the past. You and I have talked about this idea that Putin needs to steal elections from people. Like, this is crazy. Vladimir Putin is wildly popular. Oh, my God. He's unanimously popular in the countryside.
Behind the scenes, everyone will admit it. Because, I mean, independent people have polled. I mean, everyone. I mean, I met it. I saw that in person a dozen years ago, and it's just been reinforced over the years. It's real simple. I mean, Putin is like Trump, if without some of the limitations of the media and the deep state that Trump faces.
It's not as big of a professional class like that very stiff upper lip, pinky.
It exists in Russia, but it's small, and Putin keeps them limited in their political influence. The reality is Putin, why is Putin popular in Russia? He shrunk poverty by 2/3. He radically reduced crime. He took out the oligarchs being able to corruptly govern everything. There's still plenty of corruption in Russia, but nowhere near the scale of the 1990s. Russia now has a president who isn't just going around saying la 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 liquor, la 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 liquor, because that was forced. Just a hopeless, hapless, helpless drunk that we helped steal their election for. So that's why Putin is popular. He doesn't know we need to go around killing his enemies. He doesn't mind all the stories about it, because that puts the fear of God into a whole bunch of
makes him look strong, Robert. That's it. Strength is a big deal for them.
He's the guy who takes Deripaska, who's this huge billionaire in Russia, who people have said he's close to him. People can go back and watch the video. There was once where he was demanding that all the oligarchs had to come into this meeting, videotape live, where he got them to sign a bunch of concessions, giving back things that they had stolen, basically to recognize that they were going to, in this particular context, protect workers' rights and actually do what they had originally promised to do for workers. But Deripaska claimed to have signed it. And Putin's like, I don't see your signature here. Come up here. I mean, it was like it was a Trump-type tactic. He made him humiliated, walk on TV in front of everybody and sign just at Putin's bark. And that was Putin's point. You can be a billionaire. You can, it'll be a low flat tax, so we're not going to entrepreneurially undermine you, but you can't keep stealing with impunity. You will bow to the Russian people. And Putin comes across to the Russian person as their advocate. They don't see him as a dictator over them. They see him as their tool over the oligarchs. And that's why he's
I would completely agree with that. That is absolutely the sentiment. So it's the strength, and then the view, like Trump supporters had their view. You know what? He may be this, but he's this. Yeah, that's the way he was.
He's a nationalist. He's culturally
very much so.
conservative. He's like, we're not going to have any men competing in women's sports. No. That's not going to happen. We got boys. We got girls. We don't got something in between or other. We got boys. We got girls. You want to dress up something? Hey, have at it. But we're not giving you special privileges for it.
You should.
And that's he's kind of a little fella, but he's a brilliant fella. I mean, even though he has the shirtless, I mean, it'd be a Trump kind of thing to do. If Trump could pull off Putin shirtless on a horse, Trump would probably be shirtless on a horse. Probably wouldn't fit for Trump. A little past the age profile for that.
And we're talking about parts of Eastern Ukraine, by the way. So I wouldn't say Putin, because just to respond to some of what commenters are saying, he's not popular in all of Ukraine, but he is popular in about 1/3
Western
of it.
Ukraine
and extremely popular.
Western Ukraine is still mad about the whole Soviet Union. So I mean, and again,
just to clarify that,
the far Western Ukraine still likes the Nazis and still has Nazi symbols around their house. So yeah, they're definitely not pro-Soviet. And definitely not pro-Russia. In fact, large parts of Central Europe still have even the ones that are now politically aligned with nationalism and cultural conservatism, like Orban in Hungary and other places, they're still no fan of Russia because they remember the last 100 years. So, and they're the ones who often believe in the I knew some folks from Kazakhstan. They used to tell me the craziest conspiracy theories about Putin. They thought Putin was capable of all these crazy things. And it's because, the Kazakh, they have a long memory of the Soviet Union. So who's popular or where Putin is popular is in the Russian side. And what it is the country's just evenly divided. Eastern Ukraine, almost all Russian. Western Ukraine, almost very little Russian. Central Ukraine, almost 50-50. And that's why the elections have been so close. It's how those Central Ukrainian voters vote. And whether one tips a little bit more than the other. And Zelensky won on, hey, all of you can vote for me. He won with substantial Russian vote backing in Central Ukraine, especially. And hey, I'm gonna do what Putin did. He didn't put it this way, but I'm gonna be a Ukrainian Putin. So I'm from Western Ukraine, so I get the support of Ukrainians. But I'm going to use Putin-type tactics to discipline the oligarchs, end corruption, and end the civil war, which initially he did, agreeing with the ceasefire, and now he's backing out on. And it's because of what you know. Two reasons. He has not solved the corruption problem inside Ukraine. Frankly, he wasn't politically ruthless enough. I mean, that's where Putin used his reputation.
Yeah, he wasn't.
For ruthlessness very effectively. He brought all the oligarchs together and said, you're either going to give back a portion of what you stole, pay at least 10% flat tax. He thought Jerry Brown's idea was genius, which is kind of always funny to me. But you're going to stay out of politics. You're going to stay out of trying to corruptly influence the country any further, and let us run the show. And the few who disobeyed, said screw you, kind of ended up with a free trip to Siberia. With the round trip,
get on the train
for another 7 years, but it was through the legal system. But
on the
Putin's
train.
very independent. But the other parts, but Zelensky basically, and you're right. Trump losing, also Zelensky, I think, made a mistake. He could have come out for Trump and supported him during the first bogus impeachment effort.
Yes,
he was
should have.
trying to play the game of keep both sides happy, and that was a mistake because all
of who he had around him.
Yes.
By the way, just like Donald Trump.
All of those. Remember, Zelensky's on tape bashing Victoria Nuland in that call with Trump. Now Nuland is back in the State Department under Biden. So that's why Zelensky's screwed, and he's just doing whatever he can to satiate the Biden authorities and Biden administration. And by doing so, he couldn't clean up and that's what's leading to this ridiculous conflict. And if it goes forward, the most likely consequence is a disastrous war. Hopefully, it doesn't lead to. It could escalate to something crazy dangerous. It could be, Cuba missile crisis, almost level dangerous.
Yeah, God help us. God help us.
Which would be abominable. Yeah. But we have people that dumb and that danger's. The kind of people led us into World War I are the kind of people that occupy Biden's key staffing positions.
Very similar worldview, actually, completely to the Woodrow Wilson cabinet kind of, thought pattern. But you brought up transgender sports.
Yes.
And this is actually, are you ready?
Are people big fans of men playing in women's sports?
We have 4 different ones, and I'm going to read exactly how we worded this question because we really wanted to be painstakingly fair. You know, we wanted to take great care to make this right. We took a lot of suggestions from different people. We took suggestions from liberals on how they thought it should be answered, and then we met what we think is somewhat in the middle. And this is the first time Laura's hearing this early result because I just added another 60 or so responses that I saw come in. So I said, all right, take them, weigh them.
I'm excited to hear this.
You ready?
I'm ready.
So this is how we worded this, and it was what we did was ask people please tell us whether you support or oppose this kind of thing. All right, and we just gave them support, oppose, and then unsure, no opinion. Here's the first one: transgender students participating on sports teams alongside the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female, joining a biological female soccer team, or vice versa. Please tell us whether you support or oppose transgender students, athletes, competitors in each of the following role. And that was the first one that we did. This is the best one, Robert, for the transgender movement, and it's bad. 52%, I'm rounding, 52% oppose, 31% support, 31.5, unsure 16.6, which you know and I know is absolutely I don't support that. I'm not going to admit it. Okay? All right, so because you can look at who's saying, I'm kind of unsure, and they're full of crap. All right? Transgender students competing for sports scholarships against the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female, competing against biological females for a track and field scholarship, or vice versa. So we're trying to give them, these general ideas. This is Connecticut, Rona, Connecticut, all right? The Midwest, Rona, all right? Anyway, 54 plus oppose, 28.6 support. That's it, Robert. This is and here we have Trump going on stage and saying they told me not to bring this up. Here's number 3. All right. This isn't even close.
Is my favorite
These
one.
are more than 2-to-1 opposition. More than 2-to-1 opposition to this movement. All right. And we're supposed to all fall in line behind something a tiny sliver of woke idiots, believe. All right. Transgender students competing for sports. Oh, wait a minute. Did I just read that? You're right.
No,
Never mind.
not that
Sorry.
one.
Transgender athletes competing professionally against the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as females entering a bodybuilder tournament against biological females, or vice versa. No, your favorite's coming up. And then, so what we were trying to say, just to give everybody an idea while this thing spins, we wanted to say, all right, what about those poor little students, right, who are confused? What about students? Okay. What about students competing for scholarships? Okay, what about students in the girls' locker room on the soccer team, right? And we were trying to be nice about this. It's the reality. We need to tell people the reality of what it is they supposedly will identify with, okay? And on the bodybuilding tournament here, 55.2%, what I just read, oppose it, 27.8% support it. And now comes your favorite one. So people do not, and overwhelmingly, do not support transgender students joining the team that they identify with, okay? Overwhelmingly. And then for the competing for scholarships, like even on track and field, where maybe they don't necessarily have to be in an intimate setting. Not fair. No. And now 3, which was the bodybuilder tournament, because we were trying to get to that professional. What about Olympic bodybuilding tournaments, Robert? Because the Olympics, all these associations are caving like crazy to a tiny 25 to 30%, public, when the overall 2-to-1 majority is against it. Now, here's my favorite one, because if we're really about equality, and this is Laura's favorite too, if you're really about equality, you have to understand this is where this is leading. So how far are you really willing to go? Are you ready? Here we go. Because this is where it goes, Laura. This is where it ends.
This is the zinger.
Please tell us whether you support or oppose transgender, blah, 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 in each of the following roles. And now here we are. Transgender fighters competing against the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female, entering a boxing or mixed martial arts circuit. All right, because this is where we're going. If you're going to let them play soccer with the gender they identify with, if you truly want to be equal, then you have to be prepared to watch a biological man beat a woman's face in. Okay? That's what you were really asking for. That sounds really regressive to me personally. Yeah. But apparently the vast majority of the country agrees with me, because 55 plus oppose it, only 26% support it, and we're talking about 18%, Robert, who continuously say, I don't know. You know damn well, if we go 2-1 like it is breaking right here, which is being fair because we know the social bias that's playing here, if we did 2-1, just like it's been breaking down, then we're looking at near super majorities who oppose this, and Republicans are sitting back like a bunch of cowards, allowing Democrats to champion this issue when large percentages of people who tell us they vote Democrat and they voted for Joe Biden, they support him now. Are you unaware of his executive order? Okay, I mean, the truth is the media is still very powerful, and they are unaware of it. And if we told them what Joe Biden did and then asked the approval question afterwards, Joe Biden would be at 40%. If we ran down all this stuff, HR 1, transgender, immigration, everything we asked about, COVID, by the way, wait till you see schools. Let's get into that next, okay? If we told them this first, Robert, and then said, by the way, generally speaking, do you approve or disapprove of the job Joe Biden is doing as president? Like YouGov repeatedly did to Donald Trump, right? Do you like Trump's tweeting? By the way, do you approve or disapprove of the job Donald Trump is doing? That's what they did to the man. I refuse to sell my own integrity down the river, so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to give Joe a fair shake here, because I also want to know the baseline. I want to know how successful these people have been at hiding this agenda. And so far, Robert, the idea that the success level's high. We got, with your suggestion, I like this. We've been doing this for a while, since you and I devised a little way to break up parental status for jury selection. You remember that? Mm-hmm. So we asked people not only if they have children, but yes, all over the age of 18. Yes, one or more that are school-aged under 18. Yes, one or all under 18, but not yet school-aged. And then no, on whether or not people think transgender, athletes, students, whatever, it's even more overwhelming than overall. And then on the issue, I mean, you want to win back suburban women, Robert, this would be a good start, right?
Oh, exactly. That's where on the election reform issues and on the social change, gender identification, wokeness issues, on these two sets of issues, the corporate woke position is extreme, and the Democratic woke position, the media woke position is extremely unpopular, and the Trumpist position, populist position, extremely popular. But the problem is information. That the reason why there aren't enough people making this a core position of their campaigns. I mean, look at what Democrats do. Democrats realize marijuana legalization is very popular within their low propensity turnout base. Minimum wage increases, very popular within their low propensity turnout base. So what do? They put them on referendums. They put them on initiatives. They put them on. They put it on the ballot in one way, shape, or form in key states in key elections, and it helped dramatically in Arizona. It couldn't save them in Florida, but it dramatically helped them. It was probably the margin of victory in Arizona, getting out enough votes to vote on pot legalization for that to translate into a very tight margin of victory. And so why aren't Republicans doing the same thing? They should be looking at the same thing everywhere. Say, protect women's sports as referendums and initiatives, not just state legislation and federal legislation, but as initiatives in order to, and legally supported, crowd-supported legal actions to help rally the base, to help drive the narrative, to help shape the campaign. And instead, you have people like Kristi Noem completely burning down her political future, which she had, kind of accidentally, but had in fact built up over the last year, putting her on the national stage as a leading potential president candidate, burned it down over one bill because she listened to her corporate woke lobbyist friends and her Republican political insiders who didn't give her this information. And the same reason why Trump didn't realize it was popular. Trump's instinct was, I bet this is popular, but gives you an idea of what bad people he has around him. The people around him are like, no, don't talk about that. That's real trouble. That's real trouble, Trump. These are the most popular positions that Republicans could hold. That, hey, yes, we should have safe elections. Number one, safe, secure elections. And number two, we should not be having men participate in women's sports. We should not have men going into women's locker rooms. We should not have men going into girls' locker rooms and girls' restrooms. This is pretty universally shared. I mean, they can do what they want to do on their own time, but particularly in the school context with underage girls, this is just a bad idea. And almost nobody supports it. This is something that was identified as a disorder just a few years ago in the DSM. Yeah. I mean, so the idea that this is something that, some guys identify as women and some women identify as men. This recently lost in the courts where even the federal court stepped in and said, no, you can say what you want in terms of this speech. So this is intensely popular, rallies the base on both issues, goes to the core of cultural politics, goes to the core of economic and any form of politics with elections. And Republicans are, hiding out mostly, scared. Oh, my goodness. Delta will get mad at us. American Airlines will get mad at us. United Airlines will get mad at us. Coca-Cola will get mad at us. Coca-Cola should just rename themselves Commie-Cola at this point.
At this point. Yeah.
I mean, even though, I got a big scholarship from them when I was a high school kid, so I can never be too critical.
Different company at the time, brother.
With that caveat, with that footnote, they're completely on the wrong side. And they don't know it either. I guarantee
2-1, Robert.
Resources, those PR departments, they really think, it's terrible, the Georgia election law. No, it's not. It's one of the most popular election law bills that has been passed, period, in 20 years.
In modern.
The same with the same on these woke issues. The NCAA was really going to boycott South Dakota over demanding that men get to participate in women's sports, when to me that still violates Title IX to even allow men to participate in women's sports, because that's a biological definition under the law, not self-identification. I get it's supposed to, the people can have whatever issues they want to have in their own private lives. It's not their right to enforce that on our daughters in schools.
That's right.
Schools.
Yeah, for those, because we just had a Sarge, I tweeted it, and people were like, they pulled transgenderism, so now they're listening. Just for people who were not listening, Robert and I just went over 4 questions that were specific to the transgender students, athletes, competitors, whatever you want to run it down. We asked whether or not people supported transgender students being able to play on the team of the gender they identify with, such as a biological male who now identifies as female playing with a biologically female soccer team. It's overwhelmingly no. It is 2-1 no. On that one specifically, 52% oppose, 31% support. And now on the other one, whether or not people support scholarships, and don't go anywhere because we're going to read about school closures in a second. I think it's going to shock a lot of people. All right. Whether or not should transgender students competing for sports scholarships against the gender they identify with, such as biological males who identify with as female, be allowed to compete against biological women in something like track and field or whatever it may be. Maybe it's not an intimate locker room setting or something like that, but should they be able to take the scholarship away from biological females? Oppose, nearly 55%. Support, 28.6%. This is not close, Mitch. And the rest of you guys, and with the large undecided, we could safely break this into 2-1. And if you wanted to lean people, we could safely break it. And we're looking at near super majorities in this country who oppose this. Transgender athletes competing professionally against the gender they identify with, and without reading that over and over again, such as a transgender or biological male who now identifies as female competing against a woman in a bodybuilding tournament. Oppose, 55+, support, 27.8. All right, so I was rounding before basically, and then ultimately where this is going, which is you have to be prepared to understand where this is headed. Transgender fighters competing against a gender they identify with, such as biological males who now identify as female, all right, entering a boxing or MMA circuit against a biological female. So this might our nice way of saying, are you prepared to watch a biological male who now identifies as a woman beat a biological woman's face in the octagon or in the ring? Are you prepared to see that? Because Americans are not. Only 26% say, yeah, I would let him do it. And more than 55% would say no. We're talking again 2-1 here, guys. 2-1. Robert, this is one of the biggest no-brainers in the history of these cowardly woke issues. You know, this is unbelievable that Republicans do not have the gall, do not have the cojones, the spine to stand up to these people, because this is overwhelming. On the issues of schools, which have pissed me off for a long time, because the data never supported school closures. It always, on the early data we had, suggested that in that sense, COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, was very much like other SARS viruses, severe acute respiratory syndromes, in that they did not cause high enough viral loads in children to have it be the flu argument. Remember arguing with Tim in the beginning of Inside the Numbers when we first started, right? And Tim was like, but it's the Petri dish, Rich. It's the Petri dish. There was never a Petri dish, Tim, and to the rest of you guys. It never was real. All of the 18 studies. How many more do you need? That's how many we went over. 18. And now we asked people, we asked all Americans, but we also asked parents, we broke it up, whether or not they believe all students that this should all end right now, and that all students should have in-person learning, all right? Whether or not the damage done by school closures is worth, you know, this basically. So and then ending with this question: do you support providing in-person schooling, elementary and secondary students for your community right now? After saying right now, overall, it's almost 65%, just under 65%. That is all voters, not parents, all voters. Parents who have kids who are 18 or over is 70%. Parents with one or more school-age children under 18 is 68%, roughly. I'm rounding. Yes, one with that they have. Yes, I have kids. One or all who are under 18 but not yet school-aged, 63. So if you have like a toddler, all right, and you're maybe not in pre-K yet or whatever it may be. Overall, though, guess who the only group in the 50s? People who don't have kids.
Right.
Well, who the hell cares what they think? And it's still a majority, a big majority, 58%.
It's a third issue they should be hammering on, that they only hit on sporadically. That DeSantis has left often in isolation defending his position on. And it's something that should be, you know, I mean, there's a reason why 60 Minutes had to do a smear piece on DeSantis on Sunday. It's because they can't contest his actual ideas.
That's right.
And DeSantis will likely be the next target because there's I think an assumption that Trumpism fades with Trump and that Trump may not run in 2024. So they've frankly taken out Gates for the time being, maybe for good. The next goal, the Nome, they got to self-implode, and so the next one on that list will be DeSantis. He will be the next one for them to take out, and there'll be different groups behind taking out DeSantis to try to preclude him from being a 2024 possibility. And I think he was number 2 at CPAC behind Trump as for presidential choice.
He was at 21%. Yeah,
exactly. So that's not a surprise. You see a 60 Minutes hit piece as part of that. It's sad how bad. I mean, 60 Minutes was always political, but now it's just pure Pravda. I mean, it can't even get basic stories right. I mean, The Insider kind of ruined them. The movie that celebrates the story of how 60 Minutes capitulated in front of big tobacco, but they've just gone down and down and down and down. But this is another example. I mean, the schools, it's been as the evidence accumulated that the school closing served no benefit in terms of COVID limitation and was causing more and more and more harm to children and families. What these polling results show is that it would be intensely, and it's a Democratic weak point, because they have to keep up the fear mongering. They have to terrorize people into wanting to get vaccines, even if they don't like the vaccines. And for that, they need to make life as abnormal as possible to make vaccines the only ticket to normalcy. and government control to be continually justified, and their redistributive techniques of power and economics under the guise of public health. But they can't fold because it's all their crazy kooky teachers who are behind
They're
all
in
this.
a bad spot here, Robert. They're in a
Exactly.
bad spot. What is Republicans doing?
The NEA said
Sitting
they
on their
won't even
thumbs
know
and
until next
rotating.
year if schools can start back up, and even then, we should be careful. Hammer, hammer, hammer. Teachers have been a great defense weapon of the Democratic Party for a while, and they've been they've been bad at their job now for, frankly, at least 50 years. Our public school teachers are bad. Many of them are incompetent, and they're almost all culturally corrupted. They're part of pushing this nonsense, critical race theory, and other gibberish on our kids. And I'm not one of these people, oh, I love the school teachers. Nah, I know a lot of them. They're petty authoritarians. So the people you want nowhere near power. Least of all.
I'm not playing that game either.
Exactly. It's like I always wanted to write another alternative to Fogum's book. Everything I learned in kindergarten. Yeah, everything I learned in kindergarten. Your parents drop you off with some random authority figure who, if you don't do exactly what they tell you when they tell you, they take away your fruit punch. No cookies for you. You go in the corner. And back in my day, they teach you at the end of it. So no recess, social isolation, physical deprivation of pleasure.
Yep.
So that was my introduction to kindergarten. I'm still not a fan. I mean, they were dosing up kids. 50% of them, they're pouring out little ADHD pills, little Ritalin pills. If you really study
absolutely.
Most of your abusive personalities are school teachers. My second grade teacher was a nut job. My third grade teacher required I call her the bear. Got me to quit piano lessons because she looked at me and said, what kind of boy takes piano? And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not supposed to take piano. That's who these great school teachers are. These great authority figures are. So but this is a great opportunity. They've all been exposed by what they've done. They've showed they'll sacrifice the kids. They'll sacrifice their parents. They'll sacrifice their community while they sit on their lazy rear ends at home, not doing their job. And
their pajamas.
Get paid for it like they are. So hammer, hammer, hammer. Perfect opportunity. But Republicans are scared because they still live more in woke corporate media world with their cocktail party pals than they do in the real world. And it's because, and thanks to the people who help fund this, because they're not getting honest data.
Yeah, and here, people should know, I had seen, I think it was Josh at National Journal, really raise a flag about a month or so ago and say, this is some polling data we have on this now, and it's getting worse. It was bad back then, but it's getting worse because this is now the second time we've done it. And it is absolutely getting worse. And he was saying, you're going to lose the suburbs. You're going to lose the suburbs on this issue alone, right? Going into, and I will get to the person who asked about transgenderism by parental status. I'll circle back before the end of this, and I will, I'll do that. But real quick, I had just updated to do something a little bit easier so I could get stuff quicker. Here we go. All right, so by area, which is whether or not it's urban or suburban or rural. The suburbs now are 66% want the schools open. This is not parents. This is all voters. Excuse me, 66%. Only urban America is clinging a little bit, but they're even now, Robert, just under 60. And rural America is the highest, but not much more than suburban. Suburban is about 66 and rural is about 68. We're talking about a 2-point difference.
No voter ID for elections, but vaccines to go to work or to go to school or to go to an entertainment venue. Believing men should participate in women's sports, go into girls' locker rooms, and get to walk into girls' restrooms. Yep. And keeping schools closed is a position that basically only 20% of the country holds. And 60% or more reject. All of them. And so these are 2-1, 3-1, game time winners. And yet the Republican Party is mostly mute on it.
Picking their nose.
It's pitiful.
Here, and you brought up photo ID before. When you did the first time, I wanted to make sure this was done before the end of the show. Are you ready for this? Because the AP had theirs out, and that was already pretty strongly in support of photo ID. But I knew they were a little bit off because they got to lean 10 points in the wrong direction on every friggin' question they ask, at least. And they were 13 or 14 in the wrong direction on the national result. But anyway, here, or 10, let's be fair, 10. All right, so please tell us exactly how we worded it in Georgia and we gave them, basically a matrix option if they were doing it online. And if you looked at the survey questionnaire, then you know what I'm talking about. Please tell us whether or not you support or oppose these election, integrity and election policies, right? Photo identification. Strongly support, 50 on the money. 50% on the money. Support, another more than quarter, Robert, over 26%. So that's 76+% in this country say they support photo identification to vote, all voting. Strongly oppose, 6.1.
Exactly. I mean, it's basically Stacey Abrams and her extended political machine. And for folks out there, the idea this is Jim Crow, the African-American voters overwhelmingly support this as well. And African-American voters are not that impacted by this. This is about people who really maybe aren't voters voting. This is about Stacey Abrams' political machine. This is about all those nursing home votes. This is about all those apartment building votes. This is about the people living in mailboxes voting. It's old saying in Chicago. This young kid's learning how to register voters. He's walking along with this old, experienced Democratic hand, and he's like, "Man, and the kid says, "Man, I'm tired. Do we have to keep doing this?" And the old man says, "Would you dare deny any of these people the right to vote?" As he looks around at the beautiful cemetery, that's who they're worried about not being able to get past voter ID.
You want to hear the African American number? You want to hear the numbers for African Americans? I mean, this is crazy, Rob. This is absolutely crazy. It is true that they're less strongly supportive than whites, but overall, not really, because it winds up balancing out between strongly and then just regular, support. So 38+% strongly support, 29+% support. So we're talking about 67% plus of black African American voters. Hispanics look a lot like whites, 75+%, 44+ saying they strongly support. And whites not Hispanic are 54.3 strongly support, another 24.4 support. Even Asians, who are tending to skew pretty liberal, so on some of these anyway. The more
smart Republicans should stick this on the ballot. It's on the ballot somewhere. So stick voter IDs, take your two or three most popular positions. The one election reform, we'll be talking to some legislators about, but one I wish Georgia had in there. They have kind of some provisions that get to it, but more clarity that you have to fully announce the total ballots at the time of closing the election, not these rolling ballot counts. But all these provisions are extraordinarily popular, and put some of them directly on the ballot. It might give Trump people a reason to vote when they may not be happy to vote in 2022. Put something. Yep. Put something on there about these transgender issues. Put something on there about these election ID issues. Put some of these issues about school being open issues.
Holy crap.
And it's the way to get people to rally the base and to get them out to vote and to get them active right now in ways that...
I can't believe deadlines. I just looked at it. I can't believe it. You want to hear it? I mean, this is bigger than Georgia, I think, right? Or Georgia was pretty big. I'd have to go back and look, but... Strongly support is about 4 in 10 strongly support it, and another 3 in 10 support it. So what we're saying, what Robert and I are saying, is that American voters, 7 in 10 American voters, want elections to be done on election night, or at least the votes have to be in by 8 p.m. Not who voted for this person.
They can't keep changing what their vote count is for hours, days, even weeks.
There must be American voters are saying that the typical Florida model, the deadlines, it is 8 p.m. How many votes do you have? All right. In each category, because that's how we run it up to people. So not how many votes for each candidate. What we're saying is how many election day votes do you have? How many mail-in votes do you have? How many early in-person
more votes as the night goes on.
And we say to remove suspicion surrounding the arrival of late ballots or something like that. We worded it. And Americans look at this and say, well, of course. Why the hell are ballots arriving that late? It's a no-brainer. They also want ballot harvesting and drop boxes banned. Banned. Are you ready?
Because they don't trust the security of it.
Yeah, that's right. Then chain of custody seems to be the issue here. 40% strongly support their banning. Another 22% support their banning. So 62%. And Georgia is expanding it.
Does anyone think Disney, United, American, Delta, or Coca-Cola would be saying anything about these issues if they understood what the actual data shows? They've been lied to about what the data shows, and that's why they think they're on the 80-90% side when they're exactly on the opposite side. They're on the 20% side.
Incredible. And poll watchers, Robert, another 65. I think this looks like it's going to be 65%. Poll watchers for both parties must be able to meaningfully participate and observe the counting of ballots. Signature verification is at like 80% or 70+%. And then they want people to be from both parties. They basically, the way we worded the question, what you can infer from it is that Americans don't believe it's fair. You can't conduct a fair election, because we did use that word, unless both parties are there and participate.
These are basic transparency requirements for people that have a motivation to properly make sure the rules are applied to be a part of the process. It's why they're part of the United States Election Assistance Commission's recommended rules for the counting and canvassing of ballots. It's why we impose them on the rest of the world. It's why the OECD requires it for international election observers to be able to watch the count and canvass, along with those that have a motivation to properly count it and canvass it that are outside of the state. And it didn't happen here in all kinds of jurisdictions. And that's why these are extremely popular provisions that Republicans are usually on the defense about rather than proactively advocating for. And it's a sign that it's because they get bad data. And that's why it's critical. And thanks to the crowd that helped crowdfund this to make it possible to get accurate information out there. Accurate information to political activists, accurate information to staffers at key positions, accurate information to policymakers at think tanks and within various legislative and gubernatorial and other bodies of government, and to the public at large. Your positions are very, 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 very popular on issues of election reform, on issues of the conservative position is very, very popular on election reform, on the role of gender, and on schools being open. And so push them. And don't allow the media gaslighting or the Democratic gaslighting to forestall that. And hopefully we start seeing more and more people recognize this. And this is what Trump did in 2016. He had a bunch of people listen to talk radio. That's what let him know what was popular, and he knew how to get there rather than all the other 16 candidates, including Ted Cruz, who are busy listening to their bad pollsters. So that's why they were behind over and over, behind on trade, behind on war, behind on immigration, behind on issues like Common Core, behind on the culture war, behind on all of it, because they were not paying attention and they had bad data. Because the people doing the data are politically contaminated.
Yeah, and if you guys take anything from what Robert just said, the bottom line is on all of these issues, school closures, the lockdowns, transgender issues in sports, HR 1, election security at large, the bottom line is do not be ashamed. You are the majority. It's not even close. HR 1 right here. Bottom line, I gave a fair reading, Robert. And in some cases you are right. The super majority on when we lay out these election integrity things the media mocks us all for. Understand that you are in the 7 in 10, 8 in 10 almost category. They are the minority. Do not let them shame you. HR 1 is unpopular. 31% want HR 1 to pass. And that's after we did Democrats a solid by giving them this question basically in the correct order as not to taint it. And we also tied it to party. Now, when you poll the provisions in HR 1, it goes down in a blaze of glory. We read it from the text. We literally copied and pasted from the text summary on GovTracker or whatever it's called, the House, the House.gov website where it's submitted. We wanted people to hear some of the language that they're going to hear by the media. Expand voter access. Keep voter purges from people aren't dumb, and you have nothing to be ashamed about. That's the bottom line. And by the way, I mean, Robert, it's really whites, Hispanics are looking so much like white voters these days on these issues.
They always have been. They're culturally conservative, and most African American voters are culturally conservative, and they've suffered probably more than anybody. I mean, from these lockdown politics. They've been denied access to their kids getting a quality education. They've been denied. I mean, overwhelmingly, the people who lost jobs were in the working class sectors. Overwhelmingly, it's African Americans disproportionately who don't want to be forced to take the vaccine. It's a lot of African Americans don't like the masks. And so a lot of these policies they have been the victim of repeatedly. And so it's not a surprise. That's how popular these positions are. I mean, they crisscross race and culture and politics to a wide degree. It's only a small group of urban, it's a bunch of school teachers. The school teacher types are the only ones still on the Democratic side. That's about it on all these core issues. And that's why they should hammer. And if you're looking to run for school board, if you're looking to run for city council, you're looking to run for county office, you're looking to run for sheriff, you're looking to run for some statewide office or representative office or federal office, these are some of the issues you should be screaming about, and you'll build a strong base and you'll be able to overcome obstacles.
Yes, the people will support you. They will defend you. They will follow and back you. You have it is not just because it turns out, because our school district went nuts. They kept trying to push it back. Okay, we'll go for 2 days. And our school district went bananas. And it's run by a bunch of liberals, but it's a Trump plus 30 district. And it's like, but as it turns out, it doesn't have to be a Trump plus 30 district. The suburbs, which Trump lost by only a few points, if you look at the exit polls and you take them at face value, it was not the shellacking in the suburbs everybody said was going to happen. The suburbs are now a super majority who want schools back open. And, AHR 1 overall is underwater almost 20 points. On, where was it? You just brought up something before, and I looked, and it said about a third only supported it. Where'd you go? There was, abolishing the filibuster. Robert, half the country says no, a third of the country says yes. So the idea that Democrats could do this with raw power politics is just get out there and start screaming about it. I don't know what to tell you.
And Democrats now deep know this. That's why they're trying to fix the rules, because they know if the rules are honest rules, popular rules, they lose. They lose on these issues. They lose elected office positions. So that's why they need to rig the rules. That's why they're trying to go as ballistic as they can to leverage big tech and corporate America to stick with their woke agenda in culture, politics, and economics, because they're not popular positions with the ordinary everyday person.
That's what you put it best. You're gonna scram out of here. I was gonna read off a couple more, but you got it's 4:00. I want to give you the opportunity. I don't know if you have meetings or anything.
I gotta hop on some phone calls.
Okay, let's let Robert go. Before we do, Robert, tell everybody where to find you, and then I'm going to give some people some UFO numbers. But tell everybody, it'll be fun. I'll spend another couple.
There's a live chat. I might hop on that briefly over at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And that's where we provide exclusive content, original content. Some of it's free to the board. Some of it's for people who pay $5 a month as subscribers. The goal is to create a platform that can be successful for all kinds of content creators, independent of big tech monopoly. And I'll actually be in a live chat there in a few minutes at vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
Well, thanks as always, Robert. Guys, check that out. The talk the other day, by the way, with on testimony so far in the Floyd trial, that was a great video. You guys have, various opinions, on how people are going to be receptive to that stuff. If you guys didn't see that and you want to know what to make about that, check it out. But overall, that's a great page, great locals community, and you definitely should subscribe. And this is the only way forward to get real information, folks. It really is. But with that, I'll let you. Oh, go ahead.
As a closing out, and a bridge to your next conversation, to quote from the old show X-Files, "The truth is out there."
The truth is out there. Love it. All right, my friend. I'll see you next week. All right.
Adios.
All right, folks. That was Robert Barnes, one half of What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. I'm going to spend a couple more minutes here because when I started going on and on earlier about the show about the UFOs, I was getting some tweets. Well, like, what are the damn numbers? Well, they took some time for me to get them done. So, but go ahead.
Before you go to Outer World, I want you to answer.
Let's circle back. The transgender questions by parental status. That's what it is? Okay.
Like,
so
how many male
yes,
daddies
that's it.
out there
Well, I haven't nested variables yet, but so male and female, but I can give them by parental status
so
right
we'll
now.
isolate that later.
Yes, and we will. This is what the great thing about what
I
we
know.
do is we
They
can.
love us. They're like, you really do this? Yes, we do.
Oh yes, oh yes. I want to know the difference between white parents and Hispanic parents, and this all matter because I'm wondering why. And I think Robert is right, just from glancing at what I have glanced at. There are these cultural issues that Republicans are not doing enough on because Hispanic women who have children under the age of 18 in school are appalled by this. Mm-hmm. Absolute Hispanic women who 10 years ago you had very little chance of earning their vote, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so here we go. On transgender students participating on sports teams alongside the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female being on a biological female soccer team or vice versa. People who have children, but they're all over the age of 18, 60% oppose that, all right? And only 24% support it. Parents who have one or more school-age children under 18, a little over half oppose it, and 38% support it. Here's interesting right here. Those who have, and let me break it down by exactly. So we got those. Those who have one or more under the age of 18, or here we got one or all under the age of 18. Let's spin the circle. Okay. It looks like no is probably going to be the only one who give it a chance to spin here. Okay, so no is the only one below 50 at 47.3%. That means no, meaning they don't have any children. All right, they're the only ones who lack of majority oppose it. And then 32.9% oppose it. If you have kids who are not yet in school, you're more closely aligned, but still about half say no, and about 38% would support it, okay? So overall, again, all American voters, registered voters, 52% roughly oppose this, 31% support it. And if we were to lean, folks, these people who tell us, I got to stress because it's important. If you were to lean the people who say, oh, I'm not really sure, they're full of crap, and many of them are a social bias. But if we simply lean it in the 2-to-1 fashion, you're going to be looking at 60 to 66% supermajorities who oppose these transgendered participations. So here's this one. Transgender students competing for sports scholarships against the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female, competing for a track and field scholarship. 47.1% oppose who do not have children. 31.4% support it. So it's still negative, almost negative 16 among people who don't even have kids. It starts to grow with those who are have kids, but they're not in school. It starts to grow with them at all the way up to half. And then once you go back, I'll tell you what, it's hard to get it to go back. For those who have one or more school-age children under 18, 54% oppose, only 34% support. And then, yes, and they're all over the age of 18. This is interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I think that's because they're older and they tend to be more conservative. It has nothing to do with whether or not their kids are still in school. I think they're just a little older and tend to be more conservative, and they've gone through life with kids already. Yeah. So they think to themselves, you know what, my kid could have used all the fairness they could get, right? Mm-hmm. Life was already enough unfair in a lot of these areas. I would have not wanted to be any more fair. All over the age of 18, about 63% oppose, only 21.8% support. Again, folks, I'm going to say this after every time I read one of these. Major takeaways is that this transgender woke stuff with sports is deeply, deeply unpopular. It's even more unpopular with people who have children, but that doesn't really matter. It's unpopular. Transgender athletes competing professionally against the gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female entering a bodybuilder tournament against biological males or females, or vice versa. Again, that category that seems to be the most opposed to this. Yes, all over the age of 18. Come on, can we scoot over? Sometimes it doesn't want to scroll. Come on, scroll. Scroll. There we go. All over the age of 18 is, oh my God, it spins so fast. 63% oppose, 21.7% support. People with school-age children right now, 56% oppose, 31% support. Folks, this is not close. That's 25 points. 25 points. Mitch, 25 points.
And we're supposed to bow down to that?
Mitch, and you're supposed to lay over for that?
Yeah.
Roll over for it?
Roll.
No,
No, or bend over.
Yeah.
Mitch knows how to bend over for it.
Even children, even people who do not have children, about 50%, it's just under 50%, oppose it. 29.8% support it. Now comes to Laura and I's favorite question, because if you're all about equality and you're truly woke, then you cannot be intellectually honest and ignore the reality of where this is headed.
But
Transgender fighters. Oh, go ahead. You want to say
let's
something?
also mention the fact that how we gave the option once they answered this question and they saw how far it went. We gave them the opportunity
Absolutely.
to go back and
Absolutely. People wanted to change their answers to previous questions because it made sense to them as it escalated. They were like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. No, this isn't going to work, and here we go. Just so people understand what you're talking about if they just tuned in now. Transgender fighters competing against a gender they identify with, such as biological males identifying as female, entering a boxing or mixed martial arts circuit against biological females, or vice versa. Do you support or oppose? This is the least supported, with just under 56 opposing it and about 26% supporting it. If they have children and they're all over the age of 18, more than 64% oppose this, 19% support it. If they have children who are school-aged, meaning 18 or below, 56.1, it'll probably take a little bit higher when the rest is done, but not much higher. 56.1% oppose it, only 31% support it. Those who have no children, come on, killer, it's still negative 18. 48% say no, 30% say yes. So, folks, important to know, one are all under the age of 18, but not yet school-age children. Like this, it's only -2 in this category for this, but they fluctuated oddly. They also had large, and I mean large, 22% telling us they're undecided. They're not really undecided. They're full of crap. So again, the key takeaway is do not let anyone shame you for your beliefs, make you think you're backward. You are with the vast majority of this country. And in fact, talk about backward. The least likely person to say that they believe in the potential for extraterrestrial intelligence in the universe outside of planet Earth is the educated liberal. They are least likely. So as it turns out, the Protestant, other Christian, even born again, evangelical is not as backward as the media and the entertainment industry portray them to be. Who's more open-minded? You may think it's yourself, it's ridiculous, that's all very well and fine. But my point is, it still shows a more open mind. All right, which comes closer to your view on sightings, UFO sightings? At least some can be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence visiting Earth, or all can be explained by human activity on Earth or natural phenomena. All right. As far as people who say all can be explained by human activity or natural phenomena, 32.5%. At least some can be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence visiting Earth, 38.7%. I have to tell you guys something. This is the first time in the history of Big Data Poll or my career as a pollster that the UFO question has been above water. Mm-hmm. This is the first time we have ever seen a plus anything for the idea that people think there are visitations to this planet versus not. I don't know is still huge. All right, and actually I'll go back and see. I'll get you exactly how many people say they're not sure. But we have always found that most people think it could be explained by human activity or a natural phenomena. 28%, 29% said they were unsure here. That's a lot, which could be a social bias. Maybe there are more people who say that at least some could be attributed to extraterrestrial intelligence visiting Earth. It has never been nearly 4 in 10 Americans.
Not that high.
Never. Something's going on here. So if you're Giorgio Tsoukalos, like Robert was bringing up, all right, ancient astronaut theory guys, if you're one of them, Giorgio, I'll send you a copy of this if you want to see it. This is way beyond the Roper poll that you keep citing on ancient astronauts. This is way beyond anything I've ever found. And I told Megan, what's her name, the actress, we would poll this, right?
Yeah.
I told her I'd poll it because she's gotten into aliens. Wait, and I said, I'll poll it for you. Come find me. I'll send you a copy of this, Giorgio. This is stunning. We have never found this much.
And when you cite the poll, you have to cite the name of the poll.
Yeah. None of this crap.
Yeah, no.
You know, a
gotta
poll recently found. No.
No.
A
Big data poll.
survey conducted by Big Data Poll, the most accurate pollster in the business,
In the nation.
found.
And world.
All right. And so here's the other one. Have you personally ever witnessed anything you believe to be a UFO? Know someone else who sincerely believes they have, or does neither apply to you? No, but I know someone who sincerely believes they've witnessed a UFO is 42%. 20.2%. I've personally witnessed what I believe to be a UFO is now up to 20%. What was it last time? 7?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost 20%. I've never witnessed a UFO, and neither has anyone I know, is still 6 in 10. All right? But it's incredible. Women are more open-minded than men on this. I'm not kidding. Women say they have personally witnessed one. Or wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. Men. Men say they more. I got it. The next question flip-flopped in my head. Men have seen. That's what's really actually interesting, because you would think if men have claimed to have more sightings, then you would think they'd be more open-minded to the potential that it's actually alien life. But in fact, females are more likely to say, this is too big of a universe for us to be alone.
You want to know why I think that, though?
Because you women are more capable of deep introspection and reflection on
than the obvious.
Questions of the cosmos.
Other than the
Make
obvious,
me up when you're done.
I really, what
right?
it is you men have a tendency to want to protect us and to have something that is out of...
So you think we subconsciously don't want to believe it because it would be out of our control?
Yes.
That I believe. I would also say, too, that, right, it's like... With men, too, seeing is believing. Mm-hmm. With men, I think it's traditionally the case, seeing is believing. Regardless of your views on UFO sightings, this is another all-time high for us. Do you believe, or a question we asked that was similar, do you believe intelligent life forms exist elsewhere in the universe? About 58%. Nearly 6 in 10 say yes. 24% say they're unsure. Only 18% of American voters believe that there is no life anywhere else. And again, shocking, folks, shocking, is that there really is no statistical difference between people who identify as Protestant Christian and people overall. Mm-hmm. What is statistically significant is that Christians are more likely than highly educated liberals to say that they are open to the idea that not just is there other life, but that some of these sightings are legitimate visitations from beings from another world. That's crazy. Anyway,
somebody asked if they should be allowed to vote, and I said they probably got a mail-in ballot.
Should aliens be allowed to vote? Oh, we didn't even go in that.
Galactically.
No, about the right to vote. Galactic voting. I should have put this on here. So what we did is ask, do you support or oppose each of the following groups being granted the right to vote in national elections, which had to do with the HR1 stuff. All right. 16-year-olds, which Democrats want to vote, 66% plus, because I'm rounding, but it's plus, oppose 16-year-olds voting. Only 19% say they would support that. So again, folks, do not ever let anybody tell you that you are the minority. When it comes to 17-year-olds, it only gets better by 3 points. 63% still oppose it. It is incredibly unpopular. Should illegal immigrants, okay, or actually how we wrote, people residing illegally in the U.S. who are not citizens, 72.2% oppose Democrats' plans to give illegal citizens the right to vote. People residing legally in the U.S. who are not citizens. All right, so they're not illegal aliens or illegal immigrants because they are legal U.S. residents, but they are not citizens. Should they get the right to vote? 60%. No. No. Only 20 and change say yes. All right. People serving time in prison because of a felony. 56% no. 27% yes. Which could have been a little bit confusing to certain people. We did not make this more explicit when it went forward, but we said it as I just read it to you. People serving time in prison because of terrorism-related crimes, 74% no. Well, that's funny because under Democrats' plans, Trocar Tsarnaev would get the right to vote. The Boston Marathon bomber. The Boston Marathon bomber. Now, here's where you make me proud of you, America. People who served time in prison for felonies, but have now been released. 51.3% yes, 29.9% no. Listen, Wyatt Earp was a drunk and a horse thief, but before he became the most popular, effective lawman in the American West. This was always the country of second chances and allowing men to screw up and learn, but never holding it over him forever. Why? Because it was a Christian nation, and it was up to God to judge. You do your time. You do a crime, you have to do your time. But you should not be penalized for it for the rest of your natural life.
Well, then there's no point.
Then there's no point on coming out and being good.
Exactly.
Now, certain things I think are, can be discussed. Like,
but there are certain laws that I think should be altered where those who do those certain crimes.
Well, sex crimes, I put them in another category.
Yes.
My own personal views,
Yes.
because sex crimes there's something wrong with you.
To me,
it's not like
a sex crime
it's not a bad mistake, Laura.
It's a violation of somebody else's.
But it's a sickness,
Yes.
like because it's not a mistake, Laura. Like, I fell in a drug addiction. I robbed a bank because I needed money. I was slinging drugs because I needed money. Like this is different.
That's different.
This is I'm a sexual predator who gets off on hurting other people, whatever race, whatever gender they are. There's something wrong. That's a mental problem.
Yes.
Even though soon that will not be a mental disorder.
What did somebody say?
The Canadian doctor we interviewed.
What was that? The pedos are.
Yeah,
what?
you was saying that as a society in Canada, they're doing much better. That to understanding that pedophiles are people too, and that in the end it's not their fault. They can't help themselves. So we need to be more understanding.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hold your breath on that one.
Let it be your daughter.
Yeah.
How well understanding will you be?
Or your personhood.
Abolishing the filibuster, for those who missed that, is unpopular. Half the country says no, only like 20-something% says yes, or 30, I think it may be close to 30 flat. You know what? I'll look at it right now. Let's see how many people got vaccinated. We asked about that too. Yeah, it's about 45% say no, do not abolish it. Only 30%. So it's negative 15 basically. And unsure is 23. Huge number of people who are not that familiar with the filibuster yet. All right. We explained it to them. We basically said that as long-standing principle in the U.S. Senate, long-standing rule in the U.S. Senate, that prohibits a bill from moving to the floor for a vote unless 60 senators agree. And it is and I put it in quotes because that is a quote, it is to protect against the tyranny of the majority. And then the other side of it says abolish the filibuster because one party, simple majority rule is more important, right? And the truth is 30% of the country believes in simple majority rule. That's it.
Ooh, good question.
Let's see what else. Oh, I was going to ask about look at vaccinations.
Well, what do you think about gun rights? People who have paid their debt to society be allowed to own guns.
For me personally,
I think if it's a non-violent crime,
definitely,
where it wasn't a shooting.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah.
But if it was something where you killed somebody,
murder may be a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah,
but even back in the day, Laura, murderers
still got
their guns back.
I know.
You know, I mean, it's just true. Okay, so 43% told us they already got vaccinated. 32.7% said they intend to get vaccinated, but about a quarter of the country says they will not get vaccinated. I got to tell you guys, we have polled for clients before the question of will you get the flu vaccine this year, or have you gotten it already? And it's typically around 70 to 75% who will tell us I either got it or I'm going to get it. And about a quarter who will say I'm not getting it. In the end, only about 40 to 50% of the public vaccinates themselves for the flu. I'm curious to see if coronavirus ends up being any different. Will that 32.7%, will that vast majority of that 32.7% actually go to get vaccinated? I don't know, guys. I don't know. I think obviously the way that it's available in some areas for certain people and not others, I guess then it's likely a good deal of them will when it becomes available to them. But I do think we're looking at least a quarter in this country who absolutely will not get vaccinated, and there's not a damn thing you can do to make them get vaccinated. So it begs the question. You're not going to force these people to do this. You're not. So get over it. All right, tell Dr. Fauci it's not happening. So are we going to be locked down forever? That's something that as a country, we're going to have to decide. Anyway, how much trust? We can go over trust and indicators on Inside the Numbers tomorrow. There is a crisis of confidence with big tech companies right now. All right? About a third of the country says they have little trust, little confidence in them, and about a quarter says none at all. So you have almost 6 in 10 Americans, big tech being in the hole, 6 in 10. We're going to be starting a trust indicator of our own. So Gallup has trust in institutions, even though they don't even word the question like that. It's weird. I mean, it's great. We gave a very, apple to apple wording up in our question. Please tell me how much trust you have in each institution. A great deal, quite a lot, some, or very little. All right? And we will go over the rest. It's already 4:30. Damn. We'll go over the rest. Oh, big announcement. Inside the Numbers will be on tomorrow. It looks like it's either going to be 11 or 12. I'm shooting for 11. I want 11. All right? Inside the Numbers will be on tomorrow. We have way too much data to process and put out and go over and discuss and communicate about for 2-3 shows a week this week.
Yeah, so
I'm working for you guys.
more data, more show time.
More data, more show. So support the Public Polling Project.
Go to
More data, more show. It's just way too much, guys. I didn't even get into all of this. We asked about 13 or 14 trust indicators alone. There's a lot more depth we can go into with election integrity issues. A lot more depth we can go into with coronavirus. We didn't even get barely into Joe Biden's approval rating, how he's doing at the border, which is not good.
Not good.
Not good. All right. Strongly disapprove is 4 and 10%. Joe Biden is underwater on the border and immigration. Extremely underwater. All right. So even though people generally say they approve of the job, but it's not great. It is not no 65. Like I told you again, it is not no 60 plus. Joe Biden is barely above water, and it's not because he has this intensity on his side. It is the country is too damn divided. It is just too divided, folks. Right track kicked up to 42%, but it's never going to get to where we had it with Trump. which actually got positive for a hot second there. I mean, maybe it will. I just don't see it happening. It's about -8. Right track, wrong track. But we'll check it out. It's not -30 anymore, at least, you know. But we will check this all out tomorrow on the show, Inside the Numbers. It is 4:26. I'm going to kick rocks. So much to talk about, folks. As you know, I love doing this. We also have other responses rolling in. Yes. I will update this as we go, and then by tomorrow, I will drop you. You will have visualizations and charts. And in fact, you may have some later tonight. Mm-hmm. It's just I am giving some people, like I told you about what had happened with the hiccup. I see there are partials out there. I'm giving them some time to circle back on our interactives and on our onlines. People have the option to save and continue. They can save and come back later. We give them a deadline, usually 3 to 7 days. So we're giving people some time. I'm not going to wait 7 days, but I am going to give people at least some time, especially if they're more than halfway through a questionnaire. I'm going to feel bad. Like, oh, you're cut off. It's over. Give them some time and get it down a little bit. Add them to the pot, and then we'll reprocess it. Don't expect, huge changes. But the takeaway is from today's show, and we're going to talk more about it tomorrow. Do not be ashamed of who you are and what you believe. Do not let the tyranny of the minority, the slim minority, scare you or bully you. And that Joe Biden is where you would expect Joe Biden to be in a country that truly is 50-50. 65% my Italian Greek beyond. He's never gotten to 65%, and he never will get to 65%. No. Unless something dramatic changes. Barack Obama was at 65% when he was first elected. Do you think he's transcending the image of Barack Obama?
I feel so bad for
at this point, these people, these Reuters polls, you guys just shame on you. Shame on you. AP and the rest of you. Shame on you. All right, so here we go with that. All right, guys, you can still follow me on Twitter for now. I don't know, a couple more transgender questions and I may be gone. Yeah. If so, see you on Tucker. At Peoples_Pundit on Twitter. You can get me on Gitmo Life at Peoples Pundit on Gitmo Life. And of course, the best place to follow me now is on Locals. You would have had input with this survey. We had a conversation about it. Some great question ideas from everybody. I wish I could get every single one of them in, but I can't. 40 questions, a big survey. We had to slice some of the fat off that puppy. But we got a lot.
Also do some special things on Locals just for.
And yeah, we got some really cool things coming up with.
I have some
this
ideas.
way you can understand rich lingo. Is just some ideas. And plus more. And then also, as well, California. So I had that up now. If you haven't seen it, go up on Locals if you're a Locals member. Give me your input on California. I'm wrapping that today. So the questionnaire will be finished. The project will be launched tonight. So we can have a day or two of buffer before we can show it to you later in the week. All right, sound good? And with that, peoplespundit.locals.com. No daily. peoplespundit.locals.com. And you will see even some changes. It's our way to fight back against big tech for targeting people who give you accurate information. All right, so with that, I'm going to peel. I don't think I missed anything. If you like the channel, if you like the YouTube videos, then, of course, even if you're a Locals member, if you got a Gmail or something, like the page or subscribe, to People's Pundit Daily on YouTube. Hit that notification bell. That'll let you know when we're going to go live. And if you like the video, appreciate that thumbs up. That will help with that funny little algorithm. And if you don't like the video, hit the thumbs down. However, I don't know how you could possibly not like the most accurate data for the third or fourth election cycle period. I'm not going to be modest anymore. I'm not going to be modest anymore because all I have is my record against the smears.
Yes.
That's all I got. So why be modest about it? Anyway, and of course, if you're still on Facebook, like the page People's Pundit Daily on Facebook. All right? And with that, we're out. We will see you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Oh my God, I almost said 8 a.m. No.
No.
11 a.m.
There's no way.
Eastern Standard Time. All right. Thanks
11 a.m.
And of course, guys, don't forget to follow along with Robert too. I want to thank Robert once again, for coming on. Great discussion as always. We will see you guys tomorrow on Inside the Numbers with the People's Pund. All the best, folks. All the best.
Bye.